Okay, I would like to call the meeting to order. Welcome everyone to the January 27th, 2022 school committee meeting. In keeping with an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law by Governor Baker on June 16th, 2021. This meeting will be conducted remotely over Zoom. Attendance by board members will be remote and attendance shall count towards quorum. The meeting will be broadcast live on Facebook and recorded on ECAT. This meeting is open to the public and we'll take questions by the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. Please make sure to include your full name and address. We'll do our best to answer all questions. However, we will not read questions that have already been answered. All right, thank you. All right, first up is the regular school committee meeting minutes of Thursday, December 16th, 2021. Is there any questions, comments, edits? I can't always see everybody, so please jump in if I... Okay. Can I get a motion to accept the regular school committee meeting minutes of December 16th, 2021?
Star, so moved.
I get a second?
DeLuca, second.
All right, roll call vote.
O'Neill, yes.
Durance, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
All right, thank you. The next minutes are from the regular school committee meeting on Thursday, January 13th, 2022. Any questions, comments, edits?
Michelle?
Yes.
So I already, I had the names on the school committee notes when I was talking last week. I gave Lynn the name, so I'm all set on that, okay? It was on the last page, school committee notes.
Oh,
There were
okay.
a couple names that were missing. She's got it, she's all set. That's the only thing I had.
Okay, so we'll be accepting them with those edits.
Yeah.
Correct? Because we haven't seen, okay. All right. Anyone else?
Michelle,
Yes, Caroline?
Michelle, we are on the 13th, right?
Yes.
Yes,
I'm trying to, I can barely see my little teeny print on this, but on the trip acceptance,
Yes.
it says that it was suggested that everyone attending the trip test prior to the trip. I don't think it was really just a suggestion. Didn't we make that a requirement?
I was thinking that we did, and that Dr. Cabral or Chrissy, I don't remember who chimed in, said that they would provide those tests.
Yes.
Right. They said they provide them, but I don't think it was just a suggestion. In other words, I think suggestion makes it sound like it was, we felt it was optional that people should test. A suggestion is pretty mild. I think it was actually a requirement. But
That's
I could be
correct.
mistaken. I could be
You're not
misremembering.
mistaken. That's correct. And we can provide the test.
So I would suggest that we say that it was the committee agreed to require or something like that,
Okay.
that everyone take a test, with the exception noted, obviously.
Okay. Any other comments, edits? Okay, can I get a motion to accept the regular school committee meeting minutes from Thursday, January 13th, 2022 with the 2 edits that were mentioned tonight?
Star,
yes,
so
moved.
moved, DeLuca.
Okay, we got to sort this out now. I'll drop off.
All right, how about a
So
second?
moved. So moved, DeLuca.
Star, second.
Okay, roll call vote.
O'Neill, yes.
Durance, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Okay, thank you. And the last set of minutes is from executive session, Thursday, January 13th, 2022. Is there anyone that wants me to hold them for comments later? Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the executive session meeting minutes from Thursday, January 13th, 2022, but not release?
O'Neill, so moved.
Can I get a second?
Wiseman, second.
All right, roll call vote.
O'Neill, yes.
Durant, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
All right, thank you. Is Chrissy's on here, right? Chrissy, if you see Dr. Bornstein jump in, because I'm having a hard time seeing everything at once, will you let me know?
Yep.
Thank you.
We expect him around 6:15.
Okay. Vote to approve iHealth Labs Inc. contract. Dr. Cabral?
Thank you. So we have, or you have a contract in your packet for testing for staff. This was ordered prior to the commissioner's announcement that we were going to be getting them from the state. However, that is only scheduled to go into April. And so this supply will be able to utilize until the end of the school year. We do believe that this falls under FEMA reimbursement. So you are approving the contract because it is over $25,000. However, it is not coming from our operational budget.
Any questions or comments from anyone? Caroline?
Do we just assume or hope that it will come from the FEMA funds, whatever?
No, it is, I mean,
or-
it's supposed to, but we always say just to be sure. But we
Okay.
ordered it knowing, not yet knowing that it was FEMA eligible. So we had been able to earmark some facilities, equipment line to this purchase. And so it's good that it's gonna come from FEMA, but if it doesn't, it's not gonna be the end of the world.
That's great. I just want to be sure we didn't get any unexpected bad
No, of
news.
course, no, we
Yeah.
would, yeah, we would not put ourselves in that position.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else?
No, I
Okay.
think I'm all set. I would echo what Alicia said as far as the presentation. She covered it all.
All right, Dave. All right, can I get a motion to accept the iHealth Lab Inc. contract?
Wiseman, so moved.
Can I get a second?
O'Neill, second.
Roll call vote.
O'Neill, yes.
Durant, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
All right, thank you. All right. Next up, vote to approve the American Safety Programs and Training Inc. contract. Dr. Cabral?
Thanks. As part of our efforts at Oliver Ames, we are working on the early college program, but also the career pathways program. The very first contract we're bringing to you on that, I'm excited to say, is for the career pathways. I can let David talk about the actual contract, and then I can talk about it programmatically.
Yeah, so basically, we had to follow the 30B regulation. So I had worked with Ben Taylor, who was our town council, and he recommended that we solicit some other quotes. We went out and we solicited 4 quotes from 4 community colleges. Unfortunately, none of them responded. We gave them like 3 weeks to respond to the specs, and they didn't respond back. So at this point, we can go with American Safety Program. And so I think on your in your package, you should have a contract for the Certified Nursing Assistant Program. And you also should have a contract for the Emergency Medical Technician Program. I'm not sure if you want to make a motion to approve them both together or do it separately. And I'll have Alicia kind of go over the program if you have any questions about the actual program itself.
So just to add some information, in addition to some certifications that we're offering our students in the summer, we have a babysitting course and also a CPR and first aid course. But in terms of career pathways, we didn't have to bring those contracts to you, but I wanted you to know what else we were doing with American Safety. But in terms of career pathways, this is for CNA or Certified Nurse Aid certification. So a student will leave high school with the certification that makes being able to sit for the exam that makes them employable in that area. And the same for the EMT. The EMT program is twice as long as you can imagine. And that makes the student eligible to take the national exam and become an EMT right out of high school. So obviously, if they choose to further their career in that area, we look to support them in doing that. But this is part of our career pathway program for students to either pursue this as a career or to try these pathways and see if it's of interest to them and if they want to continue in a medical field at an institute of higher education, but they will still have this certification if they sit for the exam. Now, as a result of the ARPA funding that has been earmarked partial in part for early college and career pathways, we are able to use grant funding to subsidize this for our students at this time. We don't know if that will always be the case, but for now, we are paying for the certification courses and also those small certificate programs that I talked about, the CPR first aid, for example. So this is a great opportunity for our students to do that exploration of possible career paths in high school, where we feel it is the safest and most supported place for them to try things of this nature. It's also wonderful skills for them to have just in life as a certified nursing assistant or an EMT. And so we're very excited to offer this for the first time. They also have a phlebotomy program that we are also looking to bring to our students so that students can explore that area as well.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Jackie?
Hi, thank you. So you said the ARPA funds will subsidize this. Is it covering the full cost per student or just a portion?
Right now, it covers the full cost. It's always going to depend on if the cost changes or how many students are enrolled in a particular year. And it also depends on when the ARPA funds run out. They're available until 2024. Those are just to refresh everyone's memory, ARPA, or the ARPA federal funding, comes to the town of Easton. And in working with the town administrator, we were able to earmark this amount, this amount of funds from ARPA for the next 2 and hopefully 3 years, so that we can create this opportunity for students for free, or depending on how many students enroll, we may have to offer partial or half payment. It's going to depend on the particular year. If we're not able to continue after that, we will still offer it on a tuition-based schedule. But of course, we want to not only initiate interest in this, but provide it as an opportunity for people who may not otherwise be able to afford such an opportunity.
And so does that cost per student include all the equipment they need, the uniforms, whatever else they need, or is there additional charges that are going to?
I think David actually spoke to the president of the organization on that.
So yeah, there is additional cost, which would be for the uniforms. And I think it's approximately $100 for the uniforms.
And so does that fall on the students? Does that fall on the school? How does that get done?
That part is going to fall on the students unless we have a student who qualifies for free or reduced lunch, and then we'll be able to pay for them as well.
Okay. And is this training taking place during the school day at school?
It is at school, but it's not during the school day.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else? Nancy?
Michelle? Yep. Approximately what is the cost for the teachers and what is the overall cost that we're looking at that ARPA will be?
It's a per student cost. David, can you provide them with the per student
So
tuition?
it should be in the contracts, but for the CNA program, it's $1,200 per student. And for the emergency medical technician, it's $1,500 per student. And that's why we had to go out to bid, because we weren't sure how many students would actually participate in the program. And if we ended up getting a lot of students to participate, we would kind of max out the threshold. So that's why I had to solicit quotes from other community colleges. But that's a good question.
Thank you.
I have kind of a follow-up on that. What happens if a student starts this program and decides it's not for them and decides to drop out or however that works, are they then liable for that money?
We don't have that currently in the agreement with the students now.
So we would just be paying that per student, whether they finish it or not, correct?
Well, we don't pay the student, we pay the school.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yes,
Pay per student, whether
correct.
they finish it or not.
Mhm.
Okay,
That's why we have them pay for the uniform unless they're unable to. We've found that if they have even a small investment in it, they're more likely to continue with the program.
do students pay for their own anything in any of our other programs or sports programs? Like, is there,
Well, there's a
Okay.
fee. There's the activity fee or the sports fee.
what about other programs? Like, I don't know, an art program or music programs, or I don't know,
Are you talking about extracurriculars or during the day?
during the day, things that are curriculum, because this would be considered
Yeah.
curriculum. Do students in other
Anything that's required, we have to provide for students.
So wouldn't their uniforms fall under required?
It's not, this isn't during the school day. This is considered more like an extracurricular.
So this is totally outside of school hours.
Yes, we don't have to actually pay for any of it. We're just trying to encourage students to participate.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Anyone
Michelle,
else? Caroline?
American safety programs, I know that you talked about soliciting quotes from community colleges. What exactly is American safety programs? Is that just an organization that's a for-profit, or is it
It is,
associated with?
sorry, they're in Rhode Island, but they are certified with Massachusetts for the American Red Cross, for example, to be able to provide this training. As part of our efforts with the Education Alliance, we were introduced to them and several other people. As we said, we got quotes from all of our local, even in Massachusetts, or especially Massachusetts, our community colleges, which were the providers that we were able to find for similar programs. This was unique to us, not only because of the cost, but they were willing to come here. None of the community colleges that we reached out to was willing to provide it on campus. This was on campus at time. They allow us to create the schedule based on the students who are signed up for the program, and the cost allowed us to be able to do it with them. The other thing that is very encouraging about them is that they are really committed to job placement. And so they have connections with ambulance services, first responders, and so forth. And they not only try to place the students in programs while they're working on their certification, but they are committed to finding employment for any student should they pass the exam at the end and become certified. They are committed to providing employment for any student that wishes to pursue employment.
Okay, thank you, Leisha, but I'm assuming this is actually a question for David. I'm assuming that you have spoken with people who have used this program and that gave good reports about the outcome and so on. I don't mean to sound skeptical. Honestly, it sounds great. I really am very positively disposed toward it. It's just that you do read about some of the for-profit educational programs that talk a good game, but don't always follow through in terms of things like job placement. So I just wanted to be sure that we had thoroughly vetted this organization.
I think that
Yeah.
Alicia, well, I can defer to Alicia, but I think. she's
Yeah,
gonna
I
hit that in
actually
a lot.
have met with the president several times. This is one of the vendors that we have pursued through our South Shore Consortium. So there are 11 of us, 11 districts that are in different iterations of securing them or someone like them for this kind of work. So for example, East Bridgewater currently contracts with them and some of our other neighbors. And we have met with them multiple times about this and vetted them completely. I could say I've probably met with the president at least 10 times throughout this process to ask multiple questions, push their thinking in terms of coming to the district, vendors that they work with that they would place our students with. it's been a long process. Ever since you've heard me talking about the Education Alliance and the South Shore Consortium, I've been meeting with the people that we're going to start bringing forward to you that we have contracts with or articulation agreements with. So you're going to start seeing a steady stream of these opportunities for our students.
But do we have actual references from other organizations that have employed this, you know, I guess it's a corporation or a program?
Yeah, they're first providers. They actually train. They work with Providence Fire Department and a lot of the first responders in Rhode Island, training them. So
no, I'm
I
hearing a
have,
lot
yeah.
about who they're working with, and I know you met with, and I know that you have great instincts, so please don't misunderstand what I'm
no,
asking.
I
I'm
would
just wondering
never
about
just go on my
actual
instincts.
references.
Yes, I would never just go with my instincts. They
Yeah.
provided us with a list of ambulance services and places that they have placed students and have contracts with, and I've met with them as well. Actually, now I can't think of the name of the ambulance service, of course, off the top of my head, but I met with the two co-owners of that as well.
And they gave good reports about their
They did.
experiences. Okay, I'm just trying to get, because I know
They
that, you know, we can.
They
Could you
clarified that
list, I'm sorry, go ahead.
they clarified that they have met with the, that they have hired people through this training program regularly, and that they were working with American Safety to accept candidates for employment if they become certified.
That's good. As I said, I don't mean to sound suspicious, but I have seen a lot of, you know, stories about kids that have signed up for programs that were from for-profit organizations and then have been very disappointed in the end in terms of what the, you know, their actual skills were. In many cases, they couldn't pass the tests because the programs weren't strong enough. It sounds like this is a really good program, but, you know, just because they can give you a list of a lot of people who use them doesn't necessarily mean that the people who are using them are or have been fully satisfied. So that's, I was just trying to get
Yes,
at
I'm
the other
aware
side
of
of that equation. Okay, thank you.
Can I just interrupt to kind of answer your question, Carolyn? I think that if we ended up after a year or something like that, if we found that the results were not good or we didn't have good participation, then I think we could work with our attorney and break the contract because they're not showing the proper results. But you know, you're bringing up some good questions, but I think, you know, there are ways to get out of the contract down the road if we have to.
Well, I'm mostly concerned with protecting the students and making sure that, you know, they're engaging in something that turns out to be a, you know, a profitable thing for them. So thank you.
Yeah, we don't set our students up for that kind of failure.
No, I know we don't, but you know, it just from what people were saying, it sounded like we had talked to the organization a lot, and the organization was assuring us that they have all of these wonderful bona fides, but I just didn't get the impression we had actually talked with people who had a lot of experience with them. But it does sound like you did talk to that ambulance company that does have actual experience with hiring students that have gone through the program. So that's great.
David, how long is the contract for?
It's for 3 years, so it's for the rest of this year. So it starts in January and it ends December of 24, so that's 3 years.
And do the costs stay the same or do they go up over?
Stay the same, stays the same.
Thank you.
How long is each program again?
I would defer to Alicia, I guess, on that. How long are they just in
You
the
have to
summer?
look in the contract, but it's not by weeks, it's by hours because it goes by the certification requirement to sit for the exam.
Looking at the contract, CNA is 80 hours and EMT is. Let's see. EMT is 180 hours.
Thank you, John.
Oh, one more question. Why exactly do they need uniforms? Is it just because they're going to be in locations that, you know, require their being identified as sort of?
Correct.
Okay, just thank you.
Any other questions? Nope. All right. So I'm thinking that we should be approving them separately unless somebody thinks differently.
Michelle, I think there's a comment in the chat about these programs. I don't know if you want to take those now or wait till the end.
Um,
Give me like about 10 minutes or so. I gotta
I think we
Wait for
should
public comment.
see a public comment. Okay. So can I get a motion to approve the American Safety Programs and Training contract for the Emergency Medical Technician Basic Training Program?
Star, so moved.
Can I get a second?
O'Neill second.
Roll call vote.
O'Neill, yes.
Durant, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Great. And then can I get a motion to accept the American Safety Program and Training contract for the Certified Nurse Assistant Program?
Wiseman, so moved.
A second?
DeLuca, second.
All right, roll call vote.
O'Neill, yes.
Durant, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
All right, great. That's exciting. The first
Awesome.
Awesome. All right. And thank you, David. I don't know if you're still in
Yeah.
there.
I'm gonna stay on for a little while. Can't get
Oh,
rid of me. I'm like a bad
joining
penny.
fun, huh? All right, next up is personnel change retirements. OA assistant principal, RO custodian, and RO art teacher. Dr. Cabral?
Thank you. We have 3 this evening. And I will read them in the order that you said. Unfortunately, the first person is unable to join us this evening, but Kathy Queeley is the current assistant principal, or one of the 2 current assistant principals at Oliver Ames. She was appointed to this position in July of 2013. She, over the course of the years, has had many accomplishments and contributions through committees and through her professional work at the high school and in the district. She has been co-chair of the school council, attendance officer for all Easton Public Schools, the ADL program peer advisor, the ELL coordinator at the high school, parent teacher conference supervisor, youth risk health committee person, National Honor Society faculty committee, PD committee, principal search committee, the NEASC certification follow-up committee, EPS positive behavioral supports committee, MSAA, which is an administrators organization, educational policies committee, and summer school hiring committee. She's been with the district for 9 years, and she plans to retire at the end of this school year. Mrs. Queeley and I actually began in Easton in the same year, 9 years ago. And so this is, she's the only 2 assistant principals I've ever known there are Mr. Flanagan and Mrs. Queeley. And as difficult as it was to say goodbye to Mr. Paul for the same reason, this makes this a very bittersweet moment for us. I'm extremely happy for Mrs. Queeley that she will be able to enjoy a long, well-deserved retirement, but the district as well as the school are very much indebted to her for her dedication, her professionalism, her commitment to the students and families of Easton, and most particularly at Oliver Ames High School. So she will be very missed. As I said, she unfortunately is not able to join us here this evening.
I have her letter. Dear members of the Easton School Committee, please accept this letter as a notification of my retirement effective June 30th, 2022. After 34 years in education, it's time to turn the page and move on to new adventures. I'm forever grateful for my experience serving as assistant principal at Oliver Ames for the past 9 years. The OA community is truly an outstanding family, and I cherish my time here in Easton. Thank you for all that you have done that afforded me such a wonderful place to end my tenure. Sincerely, Catherine Queeley, Assistant Principal, OAHS. Any comments? Jen?
So I've had the opportunity to know Mrs. Queeley both as the parent of students at the high school. She has been such a wonderful advocate for all of their activities, for building a positive school culture. We were on the turf last May, picking up the parquet floor at around 11 o'clock at night after the prom. So she's somebody who definitely, would roll up her sleeves and get right to work, and was right in the thick of supporting students in their activities. I also had the opportunity to work with her on the principal search committee. So we spent quite a bit of time together, and she just demonstrated such extraordinary leadership and judgment, and was a wonderful addition to that committee, and really helped us with shaping, what we were looking for, had tremendous insight into who the perfect match would be for the future of Oliver Ames, who would be a great advocate, for students, for the community, for faculty and staff. So I really enjoyed that time working with her, and wish her the best in her retirement. We'll definitely miss her. She's a tremendous asset to the high school.
Thank you. Caroline?
I just wanted to say that really from day one, what struck me about Mrs. Queeley is her warmth and her approachability. I think that she was just a wonderful fit for that position. To be honest, though, I had sort of hoped she was going to apply to be principal, although we do have a wonderful new principal. But I just remember very early on, when she was first introduced to the community, thinking that she was going to be terrific, and that certainly turned out to be the case.
Thank you. Nancy?
Yes, just working with Mrs. Queeley over the past 9 years, just a professional, as Dr. Cabral said, professional educator. She's so in tune with the students, the staff, and the administration. We are going to miss her. I hope we can fill her shoes.
All right.
So search, of course, will commence in the spring as soon as possible.
Thank you. Okay. Can I get a motion to accept the retirement of Assistant Principal Kathleen Queeley with regrets?
Star, so
So
moved
moved.
with regret.
Can I get a second?
O'Neill second,
All right.
also with regret.
Roll call vote.
O'Neill, yes.
Lance, yes.
Cerruti, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
All right, thank you. Dr. Cabral?
Thank you. So we are fortunate, as you know, several of the people that come before us who are retiring have been serving Easton and its children for a very long time. And this next retiree is an example of that. Bruce Melendez came to the Easton Public Schools in November of 1989. He was an evening custodian at the Parkview School. In 1997, he transferred to the Richardson Olmsted School, where he remains today. Over the years, Bruce has received many acknowledgements and letters acknowledging his work and commitment and service to the district. He's been with us for 33 years now, and he plans to retire on February 18th.
Great.
So Richardson Olmsted is one of our schools that we are fortunate to be able to welcome the community into, which means we have a lot of evening activities that take place. And Bruce has always been very professional, very prepared, very pleasant to deal with, very friendly, just a wonderful person to work with in that capacity. And it's going to be difficult to see him go, but once again, we're very happy for him and wish him well in his well-deserved retirement.
Okay. I have his letter. Good afternoon, Leisha. I'm writing to let you know that I'm planning to retire from my position at custodian at RO My plan is for my last day to be Friday, February 18th, 2022. Thank you, Bruce Melendez. Great. Any comments? Okay. Can I get a motion to accept the retirement?
No, Michelle,
Wow, Nancy.
Michelle,
Yes.
Michelle.
Go.
Yeah, I'm here. I know. That's why I'm shouting out. I've known Bruce forever. He's an OA grad, and great guy. The teachers at RO respect him. He does a great job, and he's there a lot of nights working, so, you know, overtime. And like Leisha said, with all the things, I remember when they used to have the Harry Potter nights over there,
Mhm.
and they would go a little long. So these custodians are very, very hard workers, and we appreciate it. And Bruce is one of those, and we will certainly miss him at RO. Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome. Caroline?
Actually, I was going to say something similar to what Nancy said. I've always just been so impressed when I go into RO at how pristine everything is. And I think that, you know, it's very clear the custodial staff there has been extraordinarily diligent. And certainly Bruce is among them.
Anyone else that I can't see? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
Michelle, Jen. Just want to echo that when I was in the PTA at RO, we had many of those evening events, and you know, those ice cream socials, boy, those kids can tear up a cafeteria that leaves an awful big mess to be cleaned up. And Bruce and the rest of the staff were always so incredibly patient with the kids and their families, and with, you know, dealing with the mess that came after. And I remember being in the building sometimes after midnight, the day before a Harry Potter weekend set up, or even the night of those events. They were very, very late nights, and the custodians were the last ones to leave the building after, you know, hundreds and hundreds of people had been traipsing through for hours, just making a mess from one end of that building to the other. They really did a tremendous job. So thank you for all of your years of service and your patience and love for all the students there.
Thank you. Okay. May I get a motion to accept the retirement of Bruce Melendez with regrets?
So move, DeLuca.
Can I get a second?
O'Neill second.
Roll call vote.
O'Neill, yes.
Durant, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
All right, thank you. And the last one, Dr. Cabral.
Last but certainly not least, Akeem Krassenbrink, or affectionately known as Mr. K by our children, came to the Easton Public Schools in September of 2001 as an art teacher at the Richardson School. In 2008, he was added as an art teacher at OA in addition to Richardson Olmsted. He achieved professional teaching status in 2004, and he served as a mentor to colleagues in the 2006-07 school year. He's been with the district for 21 years, another long-term dedicated employee, and plans to retire at the end of this school year. I am happy to say that Akeem, or Mr. K, is here this evening and perhaps can say a few words if he would like after you read his letter. I would add first, however, that it is one of the classes. I enjoy going into classes more than anything else as part of my responsibilities, but his class is always lively and organized for an art class at an elementary school. I feel like that's a huge accomplishment, but everyone, he has rigorous activities. They're still fun, they're engaging, always trying new things, and very proud to show them off. And I'm always very proud, equally as proud, to see them and talk to the students about them. So he is certainly going to be a considerable loss to the district, but again, we wish him very, very well in his retirement and thank him so much for all that he's brought to the lives of the children here in Easton.
Okay, and I have his letter. Dear Dr. Cabral, please accept this resignation letter for the purpose of my retirement from teaching in the Easton Public School District. My retirement will be effective the last teacher day of this 2021-22 school year. As I reflect back on my career as a visual arts educator, it has been an honor and a pleasure to work with the many students, artists, families, and dedicated staff in the Easton Public Schools. I will always be proud to have been part of such an amazing community of educators, and we'll miss all my students, friends, and colleagues. I have many wonderful memories as a visual arts educator in the district and take much pride in our accomplishments over the years. Please accept my sincere thank you for having given me the opportunity to be part of such a wonderful group of people. I wish you and all the staff, students, and families in the district the best in the years to come. Respectfully submitted, Mr. K. All right. Do you want to say something, Mr. K?
I'd love to. Sorry, I'm having slight little tech issues here. I hope my video stays on. Thanks. I really appreciate all these years being in the Easton Public Schools. There it goes. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Uh-oh.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
You can hear me. Okay.
Yeah.
And thanks, sorry. And I really enjoyed the staff, the students. Thank you, administration, Alicia, Chrissy, and the Easton School Committee. And thanks for all your support all these years. And it's been wonderful. It's obviously bittersweet. But yeah, I'm looking forward to retirement, doing some artwork. I got to help my elder mom. My wife's retiring too. So it's all kind of coming together. And
Nice.
I just want to thank everybody.
Great.
again.
Congratulations.
Anyone on
Thank you,
school
Alicia.
committee?
Thanks.
Caroline?
I
Michelle,
think that you have been an important, oh, sorry. You've been such an important part of what I consider just a wonderful program that we have really all the way K through high school. I really think that the art department, but also the art programs that we have are such important hooks for kids who may actually learn differently from, typical kids. I think that is just so critical that we offer those creative opportunities, obviously to all of our children, but I think in particular kids who may, not really be particularly impressed by the regular curriculum, find their home in the art department. So I'm very grateful to you and obviously all of your colleagues in the department for the wonderful contributions you've made to our youngsters over the years.
Nancy?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree.
I've worked with Mr. K over the years, and it's been a pleasure to know him. And the kids really do enjoy art because of him. And we are going to be very sad to see you go, but have a wonderful retirement. You are going to love it.
Anyone else?
Thanks.
Okay,
I'm sorry. May I
Missy,
just say something?
you can.
I'm sorry. I just want to say thank you to Mr. K. When I walk into Moreau Hall and see his projects that he's doing with our youngest students, it's such a it starts the story of their journey through art in the Easton Public Schools. And then when I walk into the high school and see the magnificent art pieces, to know that they all started with your instruction, Mr. K. Thank you for everything that you've done for the Easton Public Schools and the students here. You will be sorely missed.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Hope I didn't miss anyone. All right, may I get a motion to accept the retirement of Mr. K with regrets?
O'Neill, so moved.
Can I get a second?
Wiseman second.
All right, roll call vote.
O'Neill, yes.
Durant, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
All right, thank you. And to all of you tonight, enjoy your retirement. I'm jealous. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Akeem. Congratulations.
Thanks for having me, everyone.
Discussion and possible vote on the RO playground. Dr. Cabral.
Thank you. So there's not necessarily a vote this evening to continue. We're just trying to keep you informed about things that we are vetting and trying to, excuse me, get more information about. So at this time, we're not looking for any kind of funding in the budget or anything like that. But we did want to keep you abreast of the conversations we've been having so far. Mr. Getchell from the Richardson Olmsted School, principal of the school, is here to discuss this with you this evening and see if you have any questions or suggestions as we go forward and continue to try to find out more information about how we can provide an upgraded playground for our grade 3 to 5 students, especially with the Blanche Ames School coming online and the beautiful facilities that they'll have there. If anybody has not been around RO recently, I can tell you that it is an asphalt parking lot really that has a couple of play structures on it. And we are really looking to create an environment for students that is much more in line with pedagogy, not just play, but also engaging them in thinking and exploring and creating and being in touch with nature. So at this point, I'll just turn it over to Mr. Getchell and he can kind of describe what we have been doing to this point, who we've spoken to, and the information we're looking for going forward. Mr. Getchell?
Thank you, Dr. Cabral. Yes, Alicia wrapped it up quite nicely. I'll just add that the need for a new playground actually has been it's not a new idea at our school. I know before I became the principal of Richardson Olmsted School, the previous PTAs went so far as even starting to think about design and possibilities for our new playground. So this is just an idea that's has come around again, partly with the the coming on of the Blanche Ames School, knowing that their outdoor space is going to be brand new and it's going to be fantastic. We're their neighbors and where the kids go next. So I think this is a prime opportunity for us to think about our outdoor space too. And as much as we can kind of connect it with the design and scope of Blanche Ames, I think that would be better for our kids, thinking, K to 5. So I just feel like the timing is really right. The need is certainly there. I mean, I've shared pictures with you. I mean, our pavement is pretty cracked and there's no more grass anywhere for the kids to play on. We would like to have things like, handicapped accessible playground equipment, swings, things like this, both green space for kids to run on, but also different kinds of outdoor spaces that meet a variety of sensory needs with our kids. So not just spaces for running around and play, which is really, really important, but also outdoor spaces for like quiet thinking and reading and writing. I'm a huge advocate of outdoor classrooms and outdoor learning. And I feel like particularly the space between Richardson Olmsted and the middle school, we are neighbors, and we often hear from our friends at the middle school that it can be challenging to teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade with recess right outside your window. And so that isn't, to me, that is a great opportunity to create a space for more quiet outdoor learning that could be perhaps shared with middle school and RO. So there's just so many ideas out there. We also abut the Clifford get the name, the giant
Conservation land.
The
you.
grant reservation.
Grant reservation land. We often take our kids back there for nature walks, and it's such a, I mean, we could very easily connect that space as well to our playground. So, I mean, the possibilities are endless. And I think the timing is really right with the Blanche Ames coming. So, we have met with the Easton Recreation Department to just explain to them our thinking and our wants, and you know, we have plans to you know, apply for. Is it okay if I talk about the CPA funding, Dr. Burrow? CPA funding through the town. You know, we have. So we've sort of started the process. I mean, all of this, of course, it's all dependent on funding, but we just really wanted to bring the school committee in, just with our thinking, just so you're aware of and what our desires are. I mean, this is certainly supported by the ROPTA. This is, you know, we've raised considerable amount of funding, I think, for a PTA through events like the Booster-thon. We haven't really been able to spend as much of our PTA money as we normally would over the last couple of years because of restrictions on field trips and enrichment programming and things like that. So I know our PTA is very much wanting to contribute as much as they can to help supplement the cost of the project. And I know our faculty at RO and soliciting their feedback about funds that we've raised through things like Booster-thon, our faculty is very much supportive of this project as a place to target our fundraising. So I feel pretty confident that I speak for the RO community. I definitely speak for the students that we would love to revamp our outdoor space.
The school committee have any questions, comments? I can't see any of you.
Jackie?
Hi, thank you, Mr. Getchell. Have you talked to designers, come up with some initial plans? What's the status of that?
Do you want me to jump in, Mr. Getchell?
Sure, thank you.
We don't have initial plans, but we did talk to the designer of the playground and all the outdoor spaces at the Blanche Ames schools. So Travers Landscape Architects. We spoke to an architect about her interest in designing the space. She did visit to take a look at it. We wanted to see if it was even conceivable to continue. We have met with both the architect, the landscape architect again, as well as Perkins Eastman, who is the principal architect and design team for the new Blanche Ames school. They are interested in working together and collaborating on this project. And so they have put together an estimate of a timeline and what would go into that. We told them that we are looking to utilize CPA, possibly capital, and funds from the PTA in order to fund this project, at least in stages. And so they are looking at a timeline of, since town meeting is in May, and that would be our first opportunity to take a look at any capital funds. And then we put in intentions now for CPA, but it doesn't come up until next year. It would make it possible, hopefully, to utilize some of those funds for not the summer of 22, but the summer of 23 construction, ultimate construction at that point. While, of course, the architect immediately had some ideas and threw out some suggestions, it hasn't been put to paper yet because obviously we would need to contract with her in order to have her services. But we know her work. We've worked with her, my gosh, for almost 3 years now, as well as with Perkins Eastman. They understand the vision for Easton. They understand our emphasis on the history and nature and architecture and landscape history of Easton. And they've been very reasonable as well, and very professional to work with. So the planning part, because it is what's called horizontal construction, it doesn't involve any buildings, and it's outdoor spaces for activities. and playground spaces, we don't have to under 30B go out for bid. So we can actually hire Perkins Eastman and Traverse to do this work. We just now need to pursue the funding to be able to do that. And then once we know from, as a result of their design work, their estimate is going to be from beginning to end. So it will be design, in implementation, and then follow through all the way to the end of construction. And so their cost will include all of that. It will also give us an estimate that we can go out to bid for. At that point, we'll be able to tell people like the Richardson Olmsted PTA exactly how much it's going to cost for the entire project. And now, instead of holding on to the money, they can invest those funds in the playground. And then they also have, if it should be more than that, they also now have targeted fundraising goals that they can work toward for the next 2 years. So we are encouraged by the progress so far in terms of the people interested and feeling confident with the people that are going to be potentially working on this project. And now it's about securing funds for the project. And so we wanted to make you aware that we were having these conversations and that we're now going to try to pursue that funding. And we will certainly keep you up to date. So while there's not an actual vote for any kind of funding or contract or anything this evening, certainly having your support for our moving forward would be appreciated and can give us the opportunity to really pursue this much more actively.
And it would be in the same space as the playground now. It's not really much of a playground, but in the same space.
Right. The play, well, there are two sort of separate play areas now, you know, going back to the Richardson and Olmsted schools. And it's separated by the jut out in the building of the auditorium there in the gymnasium, excuse me, in the auditorium. But yes, it's incorporating both of those spaces. Again, she's considering how to use the spaces in terms of to integrate them into one playground or to keep them separate playgrounds. The environment around them, as Mr. Getchell noted, one is very close to another building, the other one not so much. So you could have your more active play in one area, outdoor classroom, contemplative nature spot in another. Those kinds of things, she's taking them all into consideration. One thing I will say that I've repeated often about the Blanche James project is that our designers have been very, very responsive to all of the input and feedback from the professionals that are working with the teams, and they have really hit every possible talking point and gone beyond our expectations. So we're just as hopeful that this project will be as successful as the Blanche James has been so far.
No, thank you. I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
And Chris, I know when you came before us at the rec department, I asked you about the Eagle Scout project. Being the school committee's the one that approved that project, maybe you could just talk to them a little bit about that.
Sure. We had an Eagle Scout create in our ongoing quest to add some play elements to RO. We had an Eagle Scout who was a former RO student build a 9 square. You might have, if you've been by RO, it's the white PVC pipes that stick out behind our school. I think it's like 4 square, but it's 9 squares. The kids hit the ball over the head. That has been very popular here with our kids. It's a great team game, involves a lot of kids. And he also created a Gaga pit behind the Olmsted side that is also a great game because it involves a lot of students and kids love it. So we would like to preserve those elements. These are relatively new. I think they were put in about 4 or 5 years ago. But you know, elements like that involve a lot of kids in group cooperative play would certainly be welcome in the new playground. So yeah, we would hope to carry those over.
Thank you. That would be exciting to see. So I know that's Eagle Scout put a lot of time into that.
Absolutely. We can't tell you definitively because we aren't designers, and I certainly will leave it to the experts, but we have expressed the desire to maintain those features.
Thank you. Anyone else? Questions? Jen?
I don't have any questions, but I just want to throw my support behind this wholeheartedly. my oldest kids are adults, and this playground has been like a thorn in my side since they were at RO. I remember dragging my friends to a town meeting to get the CPA funding to build the play structures that were there, because it was just a barren asphalt Lord of the Flies wasteland at recess without those. So, certainly appreciate the years of fundraising and planning and commitment from the town that went into getting what is there. It's a vast improvement over what was truly just an empty space for the first, I don't know, however many years the school was open. But I know, as part of, having been at the PTA there and active in the fundraising and the allocation of funds towards playground improvements, that there have been so many attempts to band-aid together solutions to make that place look more welcoming. I know we, parents and school staff and leadership have been, worked hard to repaint the lines and, plant hostas along a barren wall and build a garden and, all these little things, but it doesn't fix the fact that, you have this disjointed space with a bunch of cracked asphalt, and you're really just trying to make the best of what's kind of a less than optimal design. So I'm just 100% behind anything it takes to get that place finally a really good outdoor environment for our kids, especially because it would be super disappointing to come from the new school and to go head over across the parking lot and be like, oh, not the same. So I really hope that we're able to move this forward. And, it sounds like it'll be a project that'll take quite a bit of time and commitment, but I 100% support it and look forward to seeing that space be really made into something great for our kids.
Thank you, Jen.
Anyone else? I don't think so. I'm very excited about it too, and I can't wait to see what the designers come up with. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Getchell.
Okay. Next is says discussion and possible vote on the tennis and basketball courts, but I'm assuming this is probably the same situation.
It is, yes. Just looking for your support at this point. Athletic Director Bill Matthews is here this evening to speak to you about the tennis and basketball courts. And again, the information gathering and questioning we've been doing to this point and how we would like to proceed with potential funding options. So I will turn it over to Mr. Matthews at this time.
Good evening, everybody. I'll be very brief with this. Our tennis and basketball courts at Oliver Ames are deteriorating rather rapidly, at actually a faster pace than we had expected. I've worked with David to repair the cracks in the tennis courts and basketball courts over the years, and it's really getting to be a losing battle. We've had this on the capital list for some time, but it's been bumped down in terms of priorities. But we're at that point now where I'm not sure how much longer we're going to be able to use the courts. I'm hoping we'll be able to use them this spring, but anything beyond that is really hard to predict at this point in time. So we're going to be looking for funding to replace or redo the tennis courts and the basketball courts. They don't necessarily have to be done at the same time. The priority is for the tennis courts. We do have varsity tennis teams, boys and girls, so the tennis courts are a real priority. And they are also in the probably the worst condition between the two facilities. So I would put them at the top of the list and then look at the basketball courts to follow. So the projects can be separated. We've talked to really kind of the premier contractor in the area, Cape and Islands Tennis. They do a phenomenal job. They actually redid the tennis courts at Frothingham, and they've done some work for us before and are really highly regarded. So they've given us some guidance and some estimates on the project, and had indicated that if we do separate it and just do the tennis courts one year and do the basketball courts another year, it's really not a big impact in terms of what the overall cost would be. So certainly want to get that on everyone's radar to understand that this is something that is important to us from a school facility and also from a recreational facility. the basketball courts and tennis courts get used a lot. And as we look at this project, one of the things that we would consider doing is to include pickleball courts, to possibly replace one of the basketball courts or expand the facility a little bit to include pickleball. So that's just a real quick, brief overview. I'm not sure if everyone got the presentation. Michelle, I see you kind of turning some pages. You can see the pictures of the facilities, and you can see the cracks that have developed there. So they're in pretty tough shape.
And the pickleball courts are painted inside of a tennis court, so it can have a dual purpose. It's not an either or thing.
Michelle?
Yes.
Oh, so actually, it's a question for Bill.
Okay.
I noticed on the material that we received, there's a couple of different options, and there, one is really twice as much as the other, nearly. And it seems to be based on the material used, but usually labor is the biggest cost for something like this. So I'm really curious about what the other material is that would ramp up the price that much for both projects.
So the information that we received was from Cape and Islands, and I consider those guys to be outstanding, as I'd indicated previously. But this is somewhat of a back of the envelope type of estimate. He did have the square footage, and he gave us the pricing on the post-tension concrete. So it's a concrete product where they run cables that are able to be tightened, if you will, to, I would say, hold the concrete together, for lack of a better term for it. I watched them install the one over at Frothingham, so I have kind of a basic understanding of how it works. And the guarantee for a post-tension concrete facility would be 25 years. They do expect them to last significantly longer. So they are, without a doubt, more expensive, but the expectation, the life expectation is much, much longer. I'm working with Greg Swan over at the DPW. He is actually doing some design work for us so we can actually get to a point of getting firm quotes on both options, so we know where they would be. So to really answer your question, Caroline, the asphalt projection from Cape and Islands was just a guesstimate at best. So I wouldn't use that as a hard quote going into it. But he did indicate that there is a significant difference in terms of the pricing.
Yeah, that's what was indicated in the document we received, and I was just a little puzzled, but it does sound like the type of material with the cables would be much more labor intensive too, you know, as well as being a sort of a different composition. So that was helpful. It just really seemed kind of striking that it would be almost twice as much. And I know that it's a 25-year plus estimate as compared to a 10 or 15 year, which seems really low to me for a tennis court particularly, but I'm far from an expert. So thank you, that was helpful.
Well, I have a question. You said that the tennis courts haven't lasted as long as we had anticipated. How long have they been there? Is it the same?
I may have misspoke on that, Michelle. It wasn't so much that they didn't last as long as anticipated. They have deteriorated at a faster rate. Once we've started to see them deteriorate, my expectation was that it would be just kind of a gradual deterioration. It just, you can see it accelerating as the cracks open, the water gets in, the freezing, the thawing, it just, you know, and when you seal one crack up, it's just pretty amazing. You go back the next spring and there are brand new cracks somewhere else. So I think the lifespan of what we've gotten from those courts is where about what the expectation would be. I just thought we could squeeze out a few more years from them. I was hoping that we could just by repairing them and patching them, but it's becoming a pretty dire situation.
Thank you for clarifying that. Any other questions? Nancy?
Michelle?
Yeah, go ahead, Nancy.
Yes. Thank you, Bill, for that. Yep, thank you, Bill, for that information. But either David or Bill, I seem to recall that either the basketball court or the tennis court, I don't know, did we do like a quick fix on that a number of years ago? No?
Yeah, we had East Coast seal coating And we also had, I think, Cape and the Islands came out in 2013. And we made several repairs to the cracks in the tennis courts. We probably spent around $20,000 between those two repairs to get us to this point. So kind of like echoing what Bill's saying, definitely it's pretty much time that we have to kind of do a complete reclamation of the tennis courts because the repairs, although they work, I mean, I think we've done it twice now. So now we kind of reached the point where we need to replace them. I also want to thank the DPW because as Bill had mentioned, Greg Swan, who works at the DPW, he's an engineer. He's actually helping to develop the specs because we're going to have to go out to bid for this project. So they're actually putting together the specs, and I'll probably work with the DPW as far as putting it out in the street and collecting the bids on it. But so they've really stepped up and helped out on this particular project. So hopefully in the spring, we'll go to town meeting. We'll either go for some capital funds or we'll have to go for CPA funds. We haven't worked that part of it out yet. So we're just kind of at the beginning stages, but we are trying to move this thing forward.
Thank you.
Jen?
Thank you for putting all of this together. So the post-tension concrete would have a guarantee lifespan. The asphalt would not, is that correct? The asphalt,
That
we
is
have an
my
expectation, but no guarantee. Okay,
That's my understanding.
okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. So, Dr. Roy, you are just looking for support, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Do we need to do a roll call vote, not vote, but expression of support, or it sounds like everyone's on board with it?
That's fine.
All right.
Michelle,
Yes, Caroline.
I just remind everyone that those, both the tennis court and the basketball court are used by the entire community a great deal. So it's not just a benefit for our young people. It's for the whole community.
That's very true.
Yes, thank you.
It's true. Okay, great. I'll be excited to follow this project. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Michelle, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Bill, if you could just stay, because in 2 agenda items, you'll be back on. So I don't know if you just
Actually,
wanted to-
I was actually just going to ask the chair if she wouldn't mind moving up item number 9.
Great, thank you.
We
Yeah.
estimated a 6:15 start on that for our
Yeah.
guest speaker, and we were just a couple minutes off. But if we just move it up, we'll be fine.
All right, I just didn't see him yet. Is he in here?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I would like to make a motion to move item 9 up to our next order of business.
Wiseman, second.
All right, roll call vote.
O'Neill, yes.
Durant, yes.
Darn
Nancy?
mute button. She's unmuting.
Just thumbs up, Neil.
Yes, DeLuca, yes.
What?
Sorry.
Wiseman, yes.
Star,
I was
yes.
gonna do that.
All right, excellent. So then that would make our next order of business. Discussion of return to play policy, first reading.
Thank you. So Dr. Bornstein is here this evening. He is our district physician, as is Dr. Garnier from Middleborough Pediatrics. We've been very fortunate to work with them this year. They have been extremely responsive and helpful in this situation we find ourselves in, particularly with COVID. And we've asked him to join us this evening because we are providing you with the first reading of a potential school committee policy on return to play, which is the policy that we would follow for athletes returning from being positive for COVID to return to competitive athletics at particularly the middle school and the high school. So I will, if you don't mind, Dr. Bornstein, I can perhaps turn this over to you. You could let us know your thoughts about the draft, about whether you would recommend any changes to that or suggestions, and just general information about return to play protocol in general, if you don't mind. Thank you
Sure.
for joining us this evening. Appreciate it very
No
much.
problem. Bear with me 1 second. I'm going to try to pull that up, the draft on my other computer while I'm here. I'm still in my office, obviously. So just to give a little bit of background, the return to play guidelines that have been set out medically since COVID started have evolved over time as information has changed about what the risks are. And various groups weigh in on this: the American Cardiac, the cardiac groups, the sports medicine groups, the American Academy of Pediatrics, et cetera. The most recent professional medical guidelines from the American Academy of Pediatrics came out near the end of December. Actually, I'm sorry, early December, prior to Omicron. And there were some vagaries in it medically, which had created some confusion. And then everything kind of became very difficult coming back from the school vacation time for schools because of the change in the CDC policy about the return to school policy. Simply put, there's always been a guidance, and that has not changed medically because the data medically has not changed, that in the first 10 days, especially after infection, that people should not be exercising because that is the peak time when cardiac problems from the disease are likely to occur, and that is at any age. And so that was easier for schools to work around when the quarantine was automatically a 10-day quarantine. Like there was no question about the timing of when a kid's coming back to school and coming back to play because they coincided to an extent. And then when the CDC changed their guidance and split their isolation period into 5 and 5, where they could do 5 days home and then 5 days strictly masked, it created a tremendous amount of confusion in the community for parents as well as schools about what to do around sports, because the assumption on parents' parts was that, well, my kid's in school, can't they go back? Why can't they just go back and play their sport? And to some extent, this is a learning process for the community as a whole, similar to what we experienced when we were starting to put in the concussion protocols. And prior to all the concussion data coming through, the protocols were like, yeah, they just went back in and played. And then as information came to, better about the importance of making sure that there's a graduated return to play for someone coming back from a concussion for safety reasons, it took parents a while to kind of wrap their heads around that. So for now, the issue is helping families have clarity about what to expect when their kid gets COVID or has had COVID recently, about when they're going back to school and when they're going back to play. And then the other thing, of course, that hit was Omicron, where we suddenly had this humongous upswing in the number of cases. So it made it more difficult as well. So the basic outlines that are in the handout stem from the AAP guidelines as well. And just for people to know, our group, we're the school physicians, not only for Easton, but for a number of communities in the area. So we held for all of our schools that we work with, we held a school nurses meeting and invited the administrators a couple of weeks ago to talk about some of the issues of Omicron. Because part of our hope is to help make things a little more regionally consistent, because parents get upset when kids are doing one thing in one town and something different in the town next door. All right. So I'm sorry, Chrissy, I can't pull this up easily while I'm trying to talk at the same time. The easy thing to state is that for any participant in organized sports activity at the school, the guidelines would state this as well, that they should do a graduated return to play after they've been medically cleared to start that program. So the first thing that the school needs to make sure that parents are clear about is who does the medical clearance. We've had other schools struggle with this, where the parents were pushing on school nurses or the trainer to do the medical clearance, and that is outside their licensure. They're not clinicians in that capacity. So the step process for a student athlete coming back is some sort of documentation from a medical provider, whether it's a MD, DO, nurse practitioner, or a PA in an office, that says they're medically cleared to start a graduated return to play program. At which point, the school and the athletic trainers can help design and oversee the process for their return to play. Okay, so I think it's important that the school district and the school administration support their trainers and their school nurses in making sure that they have stated to the families that they cannot provide that letter of clearance, that has to come from someone outside the school district to say that they're ready to return to do the graduate return to play program. Okay. The timing again for students to come back, there's still, and this is true of the guidelines have never changed on this. It's still 10 days from the either date of onset of symptoms, or if they're asymptomatic, the date of the test. And the date of onset of symptoms or date of test is defined by the CDC as day 0. So for, just to make things simple, if a student becomes sick on February 1st, okay, then the day 10 is actually the 11th, okay? Because if you count it out. So when they are eligible, they would need to get an exam or have a discussion with a clinician, get a note that gets provided to the athletic department or the coach, whomever you choose is appropriate, or the trainer, and then they would start that process. What that means is kids will be back in school before they can do sports. The question that comes up a lot of times is, well, what about gym class, right? Because they're still participating in that. And of course, it would seem hypocritical for the basketball player to be able to play basketball in gym class, but not play basketball during practice. So, you know, I do view, and Mr. Matthews can probably talk about this more specifically. My understanding of gym class from my own experience in high school and from what I hear from my patients is that gym class is not the intensity that a sports practice is. And what we're really worried about is cardiovascular work, which puts a strain in the heart. So I don't view gym class necessarily inherently as much of an issue because A, kids don't like to sweat around other kids who they feel self-conscious about, so they don't generally put in as much hard work in it. B, it is, you know, you have the faculty there to observe the kids while they're there. So if a kid is having symptoms or something, they could, send them to the nurse. So I think it would be very hard to internally in the school to restrict or necessarily cut people out of gym unless the physician explicitly states that. So just for your sake, from our practice, when we write our letter about when they can return to school, we will explicitly state on the letter that they may not return to gym class or other things until they've had medical clearance. But I recognize that other practices, for simple purposes of how their electronic medical record systems work and how easily it is to template these things, may not have the easy ability to customize those letters as much. And I think from the school standpoint, if the gym classes are not super high intensity, cardiovascular workout kind of stuff, then I think it's okay to do some light stuff in gym for the general population coming back from COVID. Okay, but that's something that I think Mr. Matthews might want to discuss with his faculty. Well, I don't know if you oversee the.
I don't, no.
Okay, so that would be one of the Dr. Cabral and the school principals would discuss that.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right about the intensity in competitive play as opposed to, and even the duration, the length of it.
The duration is shorter, that's right. Because by the time they get dressed and do their thing and then have to clean up, it's probably 15, 20 minutes or something like that. So that gym class issue, I think doesn't need to be put in as policy. But I think it's something that the question is going to come up from parents. So I think internally within the schools, you need to have some answers to those questions on hand. The other issue is you're going to have this huge wave of kids that need to be cleared to play. And I'm presuming, like most schools, you have one trainer I don't know, do you have more than one trainer? You
We have one trainer.
Right, so it's overwhelming for the trainers right now. They don't have the ability to individually do this for every individual. They don't have much time in the day to do that. So, I think there are some ways in which that can be done that I think you would want to involve your trainer to discuss if that person feels are appropriate. So in theory, one way would be to do group work. So if you have a group of kids that are on stage step 1 of the graduate return to play program, they all go together at the same time. They do their 15 minutes or whatever it is together. And that way the trainer can supervise a group at a time as opposed to doing one person at a time. It's the equivalent of doing a group visit as opposed to an individual visit. And that could create some efficiency. It does create some organization about how you block that time. The second way, and this is kind of a district-wide question, has to do with delegation. So in the same way that your school nurses may be allowed to delegate giving of medication to someone who's a non-medical professional, as long as they've been trained on that. The other question is, could the trainers delegate to some extent to a coach how to go, like let's say the basketball coach is a good example right now, outline what the graduated return to play program would look like from a basketball perspective, like what the skills would be, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, and then be able to delegate to the coach to do the supervisory part. That's a liability question. I don't know. The trainer might know that. But in theory, that could be one other way that one could more easily get these kids back in without having to have a trainer have to oversee 70 kids simultaneously, because it's just not feasible to do it for one person. So I think those are the two ideas I would have that could potentially work to help streamline things from that standpoint. For the letter going out, the people, so the district, was this letter meant to be for all schools or just like the middle and high school? That was one of my questions.
The policy?
Yeah.
Well, we only have competitive sports at the middle school and the high school.
Okay, so which is fine, that's appropriate. So in general, this is how our practice is handling it. Other practices may handle it slightly differently, and I'll explain why. It's a absolutely true, and you had it in your document, that not everyone's going to be coming back at 10 days, particularly if they're more moderate to severe COVID, where they need more extensive evaluation through cardiology and testing and those sorts of things. So if you wanted to simplify it, you could easily say this, that any student athlete who has had COVID will need some sort of clearance letter from their physician before they can start graduated return to play program. And at a minimum, there is a 10-day interval from the onset of illness before they can start. So the physician should not be able to override that. I had a conversation with within our pediatric network, and the chief of pediatric cardiology at Mass General said any physician who is saying to a kid at 5 days out that they can return to sports is going off the reservation, so to speak, medically. That is not what is generally thought to be medically appropriate. So from a safety perspective, saying that there's going to be a 10-day period before they could potentially come back to the sport, they'll need that letter first, and then it can come back. I'm not sure that the school necessarily needs to say in the same detail that you had in the letter about who's going to be much longer or not, because I think that information can be done by the physician. You could probably just put a line in, depending on your child's medical history and depending on the extent of the illness, it may be much long. It could be longer than 10 days before they're able to come back, and that you will need to discuss with your physician or something to that effect, and kind of put that back in the physician side of things, because you want to be careful not to be making medical statements, I would say. Sure. And then for kids, the recommendations, the way the guidelines work, for kids 12 and over, there is meant to be, in theory, a medical assessment before they can return to any type of activity. And so for our practice, and for I think a lot of the practice in our network, we've generally looked at what their symptoms are. So kids who have been, because we can't possibly see all these kids at the same time in the office either, we don't have the capacity. So most practices, and just so you know, our network of practices covers about 78,000 kids throughout Eastern Mass. So it's 18 practices. So it's a good number. In general, if the kid had no symptoms whatsoever, most practices are going to be comfortable signing off and saying they can go back to sports without needing to be physically seen in the office. Okay, that's pretty uniform. And simply a letter from the physician's office saying they're ready to come back should be sufficient. There's going to be potentially some discrepancy between practices about what to do with kids who are even mildly symptomatic. There are going to be practices like ours who, for that age group, will bring them all back to examine them. And then there are going to be practices that don't have the capacity and they kind of parse that out a little bit. And the guidelines, honestly, there's some vagaries in the guidelines that create some of that confusion. So neither is bad practice, I would say. I think all that the school should care about is that there's a letter coming from the physician saying that it's okay to return at that point to school. And for the kids who are not in organized sports, then they should be able to just rejoin gym class and at that point without any restrictions. The last thing I would mention is there's going to be situations right now where the kid has COVID, but maybe they don't do anything until like spring track, right? So they're not going to start up for a few weeks. And so the question is, for the parents, it's going to be, do they have to do a graduated return to play before they do spring track in a few weeks? And the answer is they should, but you don't have to do it right now. So you can kind of work that into how that schedule would work. And truthfully, a lot of these kids will have ended up doing some of this on their own because they weren't aware of the policy. So we've gotten calls, for instance, for kids who had COVID back in September, October, like, oh, do I have to bring them in now? I said, well, you've been playing hockey for 3 months. At this point, I think we know that you're okay. So we don't need to do anything. So not every kid's going to need a graduate return to play, especially if the timing of the illness was remote. Most of this policy is going to be for kids who are testing positive now and moving forward. So I think that gives a little bit of overview. I will certainly, Friday, I'll have some time to give you more detailed guidance to try to like make the language a little bit simpler, I think, for the letter, just so it's a little clear, because this is a letter that you're planning to send out to families, I would think. So I think, it's important to make it as concrete and simple, as easy as possible.
Right, we're looking to potentially add it as a school committee policy and of course share it with parents.
Yeah, and of course, and whatever the policy is, it's always subject to change to the medical information change.
Correct, absolutely.
Yeah. But does anyone have any question, any about that? And again, the importance about this is we get a lot of calls about frustrated parents. The schools are getting a lot of calls about frustrated parents. So the goal is to try to help make it more transparent to everyone.
Jen?
Thank you for all of this information. I'm one of the committee members who has high school athletes, and I've been hearing a lot from my peer parents about their confusion and frustration about this. Can you speak to whether or not there is any data that differentiates risk between vaccinated and unvaccinated student athletes, or completely asymptomatic, they only tested positive because of a screening test or something, versus having even mild or clearly there's a difference here between, mild, moderate, and severe symptoms. But is there data supporting a difference between completely asymptomatic versus mild symptoms or not? If you could just get into that a little bit.
So the definitions right now for mild would include fevers for less than 4 days or other severe symptoms for less than a week. Okay, and then obviously it's asymptomatic. So there was data that went behind the guidelines, and they looked at precisely that differentiation, and the rates of heart disease were equal in both groups.
Okay.
So that's why the guidelines were set up with asymptomatic and mild clustered together. The rates went up when you got into the moderate group where they had fevers more prolonged, and obviously kids who are had known acute cardiac complications with our MISC. So that's why those categories were clumped together, because there was no distinction in terms of the rates of findings. The second question you had, so there's actually a couple really good questions. So one was about vaccine or not. So the answer is incomplete on that. There was just a big data set released out of France that looked at what's called MISC, which is one of the more significant complications of COVID that happens in teenagers, and it happens typically starting 2 to 6 weeks after the acute illness. So in that time frame when you're doing a return to play, and it typically involves cardiac things. So what that data set showed was when they were looking at all their MISC cases, they looked at one case that was pre-vaccine period, and then they were looking at a case post-vaccine period when they had about 70% of that adolescent population immunized. That in that post-vaccine period, all their severe MISC cases, none of them came in fully vaccinated kids. They were only in partially vaccinated or in unvaccinated. So there's some suggestion there that the vaccine was protective against severe complication from the virus, which I think is what everyone was hoping to see and was expecting to see. Now the caveat to that was that data set was done pre-Omicron. So the third question is, we don't really know, like the data for these guidelines are based off the prior waves and what those viruses have. And the data showed that somewhere between about 0.5 to 3% of kids had some sort of cardiac complication of COVID, which is not actually that small when you think about it. We don't know if that those percentages are going to be true with Omicron. That, we know some things are very different about Omicron. So for instance, it's pretty unusual to hear about anyone losing sense of smell or taste, for instance, with Omicron. Like, that's just not a feature of it. It's a very different virus. So it's very possible that these guidelines may change as the Omicron data comes through for two reasons. One, there's a much larger cohort of kids. Number two, you have kids who've been vaccinated by this point. So it wouldn't surprise me that over the next, certainly by the fall, that question may be more answerable. Right now, it's not.
Okay.
So we work with what we got.
Okay.
But hopefully that answered that question.
It does. Thank you.
No.
Jackie?
Hi, thank you for all this information. It's a little overwhelming, but thank you. I just wanted to clarify, I'm not sure I understood. So for a child that's coming back to school after 5 days, can they go into PE those 5 days, or do they need to wait an additional 5 days after they return to school?
So the official guidance would be say they should stay out during that 5-day strict masking period. But then afterward that they should be able to go back without a problem, without any graduated return to PE class. I guess that's the distinction, right? Because it's probably not necessary in that setting. But the rule of the 10 days applies regardless. And that's true for, like, my parents come in and like the parents like, oh, I didn't know about that. Cause I got parents now who are now like, yeah, you're not the one who's shoveling snow this weekend. Let me just tell you that, right? Like, don't go out and do that. Like, find someone else to do that. So yeah, that 10-day rule should be that is a kind of a blanket statement for all ages. That'd be true of the younger kids too in the elementary school.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Michelle, I have one more question. So just to clarify, and I think we can clarify the language in the proposed protocol, the return to play, the graduated return to play cannot begin until a minimum of 10 days for anybody, symptomatic, asymptomatic, mild, anybody. Is that accurate?
That is how it's supposed to work. That is correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Bill?
Dr. Bornstein, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Good to meet you too. I think we'll get a chance to talk more about this stuff because I'm sure you're going crazy with it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm hoping we're actually on the backside of the big surge. We've been dealing with this and have implemented our return to play. I will tell you that the ferocious nature of some of the parents opposing the policy that you are advocating here is significant. And I am not trying to pressure any change in it, but I do want to give the school committee and Dr. Cabral and Chrissy, I want you guys to know this is actually a step further than we have been. We've been allowing people to come do the return to play when they have returned to school. So this adds another 5 days. So at best, our athletes were returning after 12 days. 5 days from the symptom onset or the test, they came back to school. We put them into return to play. They'd go 7 days, and after that 12th day, then they would be cleared and they'd be allowed to return to competition. This adds another 5 days to that, and I will assure you that we have taken an incredible amount of heat for this. And the change that you're talking about here will increase the intensity of that. So I think that it's very important to understand the medical justification for this. And Dr. Bornstein, I think you did a pretty good job, but I think any additional supporting information that can be provided to justify this would be very helpful. I just some of the conversations that happened last week were very uncomfortable. I'll just say that.
Yeah,
because
I will,
parents are. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm going to echo that. Like, we've had parents starting to leave our practice over this. Like, I've spoken with a trainer from another district who's getting like pretty vitriolic social media stuff targeted at him when he's just doing his job. You know, and I think, again, I kind of harken back a little bit to when the concussion stuff went into play, because we got a lot of the same sort of issue from, like, especially the dads who had played football. Like, well, whatever, I saw stars and I just went back in the game, and I'm like, yeah, that's great for you, but for the kid who died and the other kids who are neurologically devastated, it wasn't so good for them. And in talking with like the trainer from the other district who's had 3 kids with blood clots in their heart that he's found in the course of this, he's particularly worried because he doesn't want some kid dropping and having to get resuscitated on the field. I mean, it's not, the consequence is not small. And everyone knows, like, the last person who's going to report it is the athlete, right? The kids want to play. Like, they will do anything under their power to play, including trying to minimize whatever symptoms they have. And the parents struggle in the face of that. And I'm a parent, and I know, and I've had to tell my daughter when she can't do at times because of COVID, and it's not fun. And so it's not a pleasant thing to do or have to say sometimes. And I agree with what Bill says. Like, the only way you can kind of try to best make it work is try to appeal to the rationale as to why people are doing it and why it's there. And their goal is for safety, and the same thing that you wouldn't rush a kid back from an ACL injury, in the same way you don't want to rush them back on the basketball court after an ankle injury, because you're sacrificing one game and you possibly miss the whole next season if you re-injure it worse. We try to have that conversation with the parents. Like, the model of sports medicine is, when you go back to your sport, you need to go back in a setting where you're not going to re-injure or make it worse, particularly at an amateur level. And we're not, our kids are not getting paid millions of dollars a year to playing the one football game a year. So I empathize with what you're saying, because we feel it too. And I had to talk hockey moms off the ledge about, like, listen, I know your kid wants to practice and they're going to miss one game, but it's the reason. And finally, when you talk with them long enough, they figure it out. And they're like, okay, I get it. And that's not a problem. And then they calm down. But a lot of it has to do with the emotion of the kids missing an event, particularly like seniors, and parents feeling bad for the kids and, like, missing out on things. But when people get sick, they get sick, and it's not their fault, and it's not the kid's fault. But you still got to do the right thing, safety wise and health wise. I do think that's important. And it would be, it would be not, it would, for us as the, the medical consultants, it would be completely flying in the face of every medical recommendation to recommend something short of what I'm suggesting. And this is Brigham and Women's Sports Medicine Group has hammered on this. Mass General's cardiology group is, the AP does, the American Academy of Sports Medicine, they all have the same, they all are in concert on this. So it's the thing that messed everything up was the CDC when they said kids back to school, because that automatically meant people think that they were fine. By the way, a third of those kids coming back into school are still spreading virus on day 6. Like, no one should have any misconception about that. We had this conversation when we had a meeting, the first thing we said is like, lunch is that's a spreader event. And people just automatically assumed that kids weren't spreading virus anymore. They didn't realize that the guidelines were set up for adults to be able to go back to work, so the workforce didn't crater in the face of Omicron. And there has to be some concession to make. And it wasn't made in the concept of kids going to school. So, some of the decision-making around guidelines guidelines are usually there to some extent. They're based on available information science, and they're also based on what is considered best practice or a consensus of experts. And like I said, this guideline is made prone to change depending on what the data shows on Omicron as well. But I think there's some liability that needs to be considered, because if you get hauled into a court in a school district because a kid collapses on the court 2 days back, on day 7, and the first thing the lawyer's gonna be like is, why were they back? All the professional guidelines are that. It'd be the same thing true if you sent a kid back from a concussion too early onto the field and the kid had a second concussion event. So I think that has to be considered. It's just the reality of it. So what I would love to do is make sure that there's help you guys make sure there's efficient ways to get people back. And here's the other thing. There are going to be kids who, like I said, who've already kind of started to go back a little bit. So they may not need to start at step 1, right? Like your trainer may, in talking with the kid, find out that the kid's been doing something at home. And I'm not advocating that they're supposed to, but I'm just saying that happens. And so the trainer's like, okay, well, if we've already done that, we can probably start you at step 2 or step 3 or something to that effect. But in that case, the liability is not on you. Like, you're not giving sanction to that having happened, but you're also responding to the fact that, all right, we already have some data in place. Does that make sense? So
Yes.
that's the example of that hockey player, like the mom who called me, it's like, he's been playing hockey all month, do I need to come in? I'm like, no, at this point, you've already done the graduated return to play. He's been playing hockey. So at this point, you just spot mine for symptoms and you're good. So, for kids who have been doing this, because you're going to have kids who are on club teams outside of school or other things outside of school, and they're like, well, I've been playing with my club team, and then they're going to come to school and like, I can't play in the high school team, but I've been playing on my club team. That's where a discussion with the trainer is going to happen, and the trainer's like, okay, well, let me hear what's been going on, and maybe you just confirm with the club coach and like, okay, well, if they've been doing that, then they've effectively proven it. Yes, Jen.
So just to be clear, in those cases, you're talking about student athletes in families who were unaware of recommendations and may have had COVID weeks ago. We're not talking about families doing an end run around the 10-day start rule.
Right.
And having a kid show up on day 10 saying, well, I started working out 5 days ago, I'm fine.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that.
Okay.
What's going to happen is you're going to put this out, and there's going to be people who had COVID, 17 days earlier or whatever it was. They hadn't started graduate return to play. They've already been doing stuff because it's going to be that kind of grandfathered in group. And you don't, in that case, like, yes, you can use your common sense and say, okay, you're 17 days out. The last 3 or 4 days you've been jogging or in preparation for track. How much have you been running? To what distance? Let's see where you're at, and then I'll have you come in and maybe I'll just do a clearance exam, at stage 5 or something like that for the trainer to do. But that's an individual specific circumstance that the trainer would have discretion and a professional experience to manage, I think.
Thank you.
yeah, you don't want to be giving sanction to circumventing the rules.
Right, yeah, and I certainly, and I know, frankly, people are being very open on social media that they'll just not report a positive test as a way to get around this, which I think is appalling. But that's what we're hearing, that, well, if my kid's going to have to be out for 2 weeks, I'm just not going to tell you that they had COVID.
Yeah. And I would call that bad parenting.
Mm.
I mean, I flat out call that bad parenting.
Yeah.
I don't think that's teaching the right lessons to your kid about being a responsible person, being responsible for your health. I don't think.
And the health of others. I mean, you're putting
Yeah.
putting other people at risk in addition to putting yourself at risk.
Right. And it's also, kids and teens need to learn how to manage unfortunate situations and disappointments. And that's part of your job as a parent, is to kind of help guide them through that. But, that's going to happen now anyways, with people not wanting to school too. I had a discussion with the kids with the new policy, the testing policy. And, my son's going to do it. My daughter, she's like, I'm going to be too anxious all week about that test. And I'm like, I'm not going to make you feel anxious all week. You're fully vaccinated. And so she's not going to do it. But, part of it's, kids who just are going to be nervous about missing school. They don't want to get tested because they don't want to miss school. Like, all that happens. That's human nature. People make those judgments. And, you can only, as a school, your job is to put out what you think is the ideal approach and hope people follow it.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question or comment? Caroline?
Just a comment, Dr. Bornstein. I really appreciate your very straightforward advice, and also the fact that you are really engaging in straight talk. I mean, I think many of the things that you have articulated, it's really puzzling to me that parents would put others at risk, but it's especially puzzling that they might put their own children at risk, just because, I understand wanting your children to be happy and to be having fun and doing what they want to do, but it's just really difficult for me to understand placing your own child at risk. So thank you for that, what I'm calling straight talk.
Well, I mean, the reality is, as a physician, we're in the position where we give bad news to people. So we have experience in doing that. The school system is not inherently in the bad news business. So I think it's harder for school personnel to be deliverers of what would be perceived as bad news. Like, schools are happy places, not a place that's supposed to be unhappy. So I think it makes it more challenging for a school to have to work through this than us to some extent, because we're more used to having to deal with that. But so we'll, like I said, Friday, I'll definitely, tomorrow's Friday. I'm sorry, it's been a busy week. Tomorrow I'll have a chance to look through. I'll send Chrissy and Dr. Cabral some edits to propose, and we can go back and forth. And I think Bill will have a chance to meet with you and the trainer sometime next week, hopefully, and we can talk through some of the more specifics of what you're kind of working through and how we might help support you through that to deal with it. But I mean, the best thing that would happen would be a pause transition between seasons, right? Along with the drop off in the case count, and that would naturally give a little bit of a break to give you some space to breathe in that.
Thank you very much for your guidance, Doctor. We really appreciate you
And
being.
yay for the tennis courts, because I like to play tennis.
Any other school committee questions before I have a comment? No. All right. So thank you, Dr. Bornstein. And I echo Caroline. I really appreciate the very candid and matter of fact approach to it and your knowledge. And I'm going to definitely have to go back and watch this again, because there was a lot of information. So I appreciate that. As far as the school committee's role for tonight, we did not get the guidance until 5 o'clock. So I think many of us haven't even read it yet. So what I'd like to toss out to the school committee is that we have our first official reading. We put together a workshop within this next week period. so that we have time to actually read the policy and come up with our questions. And that we would normally do we had some lead up time. And then that doesn't change the second reading date of the 17th in any way, shape, or form.
You can certainly do that, Michelle, but we're not going to have the edits from Dr. Bornstein for a couple of days. And then this is a first read is when you get the information presented to you for the first time. And then you have time to discuss it at the second reading before you do a vote. You certainly can do it any way you'd like, but that's the purpose of the 2 readings, so that you can get input from anybody who wants to give you input. You can ask further follow-up questions of Dr. Bornstein or Mr. Matthews, and then you can have your conversation. Perhaps he can even join us again at the second reading. I'm not sure.
Jackie?
Michelle, I like that idea of having another first reading, because I don't even know what to ask at this point, and I don't want to, in case there's like some major concerns I have with it, or a ton of questions. I don't want that to be the second reading, because then that could delay a vote possibly. And I think that the fact that all this information is just coming to us right at the meeting, and we didn't even have time to kind of look at it before. I'm not comfortable with just having the next meeting that we talk about this voting on it. I need a little more time, I think.
Okay.
Can I just ask one thing? Because I just realized there's like some Q&A questions from parents who might have been on the committee.
I usually read those at the public comment.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you needed me to be.
Yeah, I'm not sure Dr. Bornstein's going to be here at public comment. Did you want to ask them while he's here, or
that was my question.
I could forward them to him if you prefer?
Why don't we, just for matter of policy, because I hate to make an exception in one situation and not another.
Yeah.
Because that comes up every now and then.
Fine,
Michelle, you do, as chair, you do have the right to make adjustments to the public comment when the circumstances seem to indicate that might be in everyone's best interest. I would love for Dr. Bornstein to be able to see those comments and maybe, respond to them. I just feel like, he's the true expert here.
So
Okay.
I don't know how long the meetings usually run. I can stay on for a little bit if you had a sense of what time that would be until. If that
Well,
makes
our
sense.
superintendent notes and assistant superintendent notes are sometimes pretty long. So that's why I'd hate to keep you through all of that. I don't know, Michelle, I don't mean to be pressing you on this. I just feel like having Dr. Bornstein there to
Can you just
provide.
talk about the relative ones, please? And not go through all of
Okay.
them.
Yes, I can do that.
Yeah, that's what I meant, just the relevant ones.
So, let me just make sure. Okay, so Melissa Penalatori, 6 Tamarack Lane. After receiving an email from Bill Matthews and then Chrissy P, what are the changes being implemented to RTP? RTP is return to play. It did not seem that they were on the same page as I read their emails. I don't feel that remote is an option for our middle school children. If our district doctor is in favor of this, I find it impossible as he does not know our child's health history and background. Our pediatricians know better than the district. Doctor, please change this protocol. If a child can participate in gym, they can participate in extracurricular activities.
Okay, so let me just, for definitions, kind of explain. There's 2 pieces. They're actually separate and distinct from each other. So one is medical clearance. That is what you would get from your pediatrician. Okay, and return to play really is about what is the stepwise process once you're cleared, that the trainers or the coaches would be overseeing you as you're going through that to make sure you're not developing symptoms. So they're actually 2 separate things. You do not start a return to play program until you'd have medical clearance. So your medical clearance would come from your own child, your own child's pediatrician, and because they know your child's medical history, and because they you're seeing your child. So that's not for my job as a school physician to do.
Mhm.
Our job as school physicians is to say the protocol should be that you should discuss your child's case with your pediatrician first, and then let them guide you on what the clearance is. So that's what the school policy is, and that the school shouldn't be doing that clearance because they are not your child's pediatrician. The school is only doing that on the guidance of the pediatrician. So hopefully that kind of makes that clarification or distinction, that we do rely on your own child's physician to be the one doing the clearance, not the school system as far as that. Once the child's cleared, then the school can oversee those stepwise process for that athlete to make sure that they're not experiencing symptoms as they start to ramp up their cardiovascular work in their sport. And the main distinction between gym class and this is that the issue, because it's a heart issue, has to do with cardiovascular work. If you're not doing something that is that demanding for a cardiovascular standpoint for very long in gym class, it's very different than if you're running wind sprints in track, or you're running up and down the basketball court in basketball practice for an hour and a half. The demand on the heart is much greater. Those kids get to a much greater heart rate. That's when you're going to see heart-related problems. So if one was really, really, really strict, you would say no gym class, but I don't think that's the reality of gym class. And I think, gym classes are probably a safe enough environment, given the percentages of kids that we would expect to experience heart problems, that, you could return a kid after 10 days to gym class, especially if the gym instructors have some understanding of what they should be looking for in the students as far as complaints. So hopefully that clarified that.
Thank you.
The next one is from Maria Picanzi, 5 Wedgewood Drive. What about those boys in high school, middle school, 13 to 18, getting the vaccine? How do you handle this risk of myocarditis? Secondly, many students in the past with flu pneumonia, the school was never involved. Why now is the school involved in their clearance to play? And then she also asked why the cookie cut approach to 10 days to return to sport, especially to asymptomatic students.
Yeah. So, okay, the first question was about 13 to 18-year-olds and myocarditis and the vaccine. So there is definitely, compared to the baseline population, there is a slightly increased risk of myocarditis, which is inflammation of the heart, from the vaccine, in particularly in teenage boys and young adult boys, not as much in girls. That is above baseline. If you get myocarditis from the vaccine, it typically looks different than myocarditis from the disease. So myocarditis from the disease, usually the symptoms show up within the first 2 or 3 days as chest pain or palpitations and those sorts of things in the acute phase. And overwhelmingly, the mass majority of those kids resolve on their own, typically within about a month. And so it's a much milder course. When you get comparisons between myocarditis from the disease, from the vaccine in that age group versus the disease in that age group, the risk of getting myocarditis from disease is about 11 times higher than the vaccine. So that's the distinction that has prompted the CDC and the FDA to continue to approve the vaccine for that age group. And in particular, when you look at the cardiac disease that happens in that age group, and I use Eddie Rodriguez from the Red Sox as a perfect example, because he was 26 at the time when he got myocarditis. He couldn't walk a flight of stairs for 6 months. And he wasn't allowed to even throw a ball for a year because of the severity of his heart disease from COVID. And he's a healthy professional athlete who's 26. So the intensity of the heart conditions from the disease tend to be of a greater intensity when they occur than from the vaccine as well. So there's all relative risks. Obviously, if you had no vaccine and you had no disease, that would be at lowest risk. Especially with Omicron, the option of having no disease and no vaccine is not as easy an option, right? Like it's pretty much, you're gonna get one or the other or both at this point. So, anyways, that's the myocarditis story with the vaccines. Now, there are kids who should not necessarily get a booster dose, and that's something that good tens on their cardiac history and such, that's something that people do with their individual clinician. The second question was, what was the second part? Can you repeat that, Chrissy?
The second part is many students in the past with flu pneumonia, the school was never involved. Why now is the school involved in their clearance to play?
Yep. So the simple answer is because flu and pneumonia don't cause heart disease in the same way. So when you've recovered from flu, from your lung condition, and you recovered from pneumonia, then you're not at risk for any late effects of that disease. So there was no need to have a policy to be put into place for that. The problem with heart disease is that it doesn't often show up until someone starts putting the heart through extra work, and that comes during exercise. And if you look at sudden death in kids, sudden cardiac death, and when I'm saying by sudden death, I'm talking about things that are not injury-related deaths. Cardiac death is the leading cause of sudden unexpected death in teenage athletes, right? So when we do our routine physical exams every year, sports physicals, a big part of that is doing screening to make sure that you don't have findings on exam that suggest that you are developing conditions that would put you at risk for sudden cardiac death. And anyone my age remembers Len Bias and Reggie Lewis and those types of events, we know how traumatizing that is. So that's the distinction between COVID and the flu and pneumonias. It's just a different disease that has a different pathology to it. And then the last question was about the 10 days and the asymptomatic and not. And the reason why is because, again, the data sets behind the algorithm were, when they looked at the expectation was if you're asymptomatic, you'd be fine. But what they found was actually, again, that there was no differentiation between the frequency of heart disease and late onset heart disease in those who were without symptoms versus those with mild symptoms. So those two groups are bundled together for that reason, for this specific purpose of cardiac screening, because there's no distinction medically about the risk between those groups.
Melissa Penelatori, 6 Tamarack Lane. As a parent of a middle school basketball player, I was upset that the trainer was not seeing the students. It was through email and text with parents. Doing this remotely defeats the purpose. The trainer is not a doctor like our pediatrician who clears them.
So there are two things I would say. So you're right that the trainer should not be doing a medical clearance exam. Like the trainer's out there with a stethoscope and doing a full cardiac exam, checking blood pressures, getting a family history and those sorts of things. That should happen prior to. The trainer's job is to help support and observe the athlete as they're going through a gradual ramp up in activity to make sure that they're not developing symptoms of illness. This would be very analogous to the trainers when they have someone coming back from concussion, when they're watching them closely to make sure they're not developing symptoms of concussion as they return to sport, or someone who's coming back from rehabbing a knee injury or an ankle injury as they start to ramp up their activity to make sure that they're not showing signs of weakness or balance issues or things that would otherwise put them at risk for re-injuring the sport. That's what trainers do. Their job is to make sure that someone can return to sport quickly and safely while limiting any risk for re-injury. So the issue I think currently for the district is that there's so many cases, you can't have one person everywhere at the same time. And so, and this is not just Easton, this is every district. So the issue is like, how do we help make it efficient and safe so that make sure that, every parent can feel confident that whomever it might be that is helping to oversee this has done it through the trainer's approval, like the trainers have approved what the protocol is. They've helped train the people who are overseeing that, and whether it's the trainer themselves or if they're able to delegate, and again, I don't know if they're able to or not, but if they're able to delegate to the coach or something like that, that the coach is appropriately trained in what to be looking for as well. So I think we all have that experience with concussions because there's been a lot of concussion training for coaches. I think Bill would agree that I imagine all the coaches have some concussion training. And I just think this is a little bit of a training issue for coaches to be aware of what signs and symptoms are and who they're on the lookout for, and then how to manage it should they see that. And we're going to be talking about that hopefully next week.
So I'd like to address this real briefly. The situation that we had at the middle school was basically what you said, Dr. Bornstein. We had a trainer that was overwhelmed. And so, you know, for lack of anything other than we can say at this point, I'm sorry that we didn't have the staff in place and anticipate the kind of overwhelming number of people that we were going to have to deal with. We tried to accommodate them in the best way that we could to have them do a return to play of some sort and have the early stages, which are very, very mild exercise, 15 minutes on an exercise bike, and have that information fed back to the trainer. So the system that we had in place was not good. It wasn't ideal, and we will address it and fix it. But I also want to assure Dr. Bornstein that our trainer does not approve the clearance. Like the doctor, we require a doctor's note to clear the student athlete in terms of beginning, to even address the possibility of coming back to play and then start to return to play.
That's correct. I mean, I think everyone has to understand, like, Omicron hit so hard and so fast, everyone was overwhelmed. Like, we didn't have enough room for patients. The hospitals are struggling managing the patients. I mean, like, the lab testing facilities couldn't handle the lab volume. It just overwhelmed the system as a whole. And, it's no one's fault. I mean, everyone had to do their best under the circumstances. So obviously, I agree with Bill. Perfection is the enemy of very good, right? Doing nothing would have been a worse alternative. So doing something that, you're doing with your best judgment in those cases, and trying to do the right thing is certainly appropriate. But there's certainly ways that we're going to look forward to try and see if there's ways that we could help manage so a wave like this happen again, that you'll have systems in place that will help handle that wave. I think that would be the goal here.
The next statement is from Leonardo Bellini, 752 Foundry Street, Easton. I heard what Dr. Bornstein said about the return to play restrictions. Normally, when you are seriously sick, you get a second opinion. I think we can all agree COVID is a serious sickness. So why are we not looking for a second opinion? Not saying Dr. Bornstein is not correct, just think we should get a second opinion to ensure we are doing the right thing for our kids. Just concerned about how Bill Matthews said that a lot of parents are already upset and how this could get worse. Just don't want to go from bad to worse.
So my response to that is everyone's always should get a second opinion. I say that to my own patients. If there's concern about lack of clarity over things, that's fine. That's fine. I would tell you that we are the school physicians for Carver, Middleborough, Berkeley, Freetown, Lakeville, several collaborative schools, all the YMCA programs, Old Colony Y. So all these school districts and all these programs have the same ideas in place because the medical professional guidelines are the same. I think, if you want, I can certainly it's not hard for me to reach out to one of the cardiologists if you want, or someone else, just to have them get some guidance for you. But I would tell you that the Brigham and Women's Athletic Training Program, the Sports Medicine Program through Brigham and Women's, the Mass General's Cardiology Program, all stand behind that protocol based on the science. And so the medical community is fairly consistent on that. I think that the only thing that I think the medical community is a little bit undecided on sometimes is with some of the mildly symptomatic kids about who needs an in-person exam or not. But that doesn't really affect the schools. I think to Bill's point, a good physician understands, like, there's guidelines and then there's the individual patient in front of you. And I think that you have to, as a school district, the school district has to understand what the competing interests are and what the competing issues are, and kind of make sure that you're taking into account the medical guidance, the legal guidance, the psychological impact, the impact on the sports program. And then, the school district gets to make your decision about what you feel is appropriate. My job is to simply tell you the medical piece of it. And then you have the hard job of trying to figure out how to make it work for everyone. But I think that's right. And then the other piece of it is whatever you do, decide upon is how do you roll this out in a way so make sure people aren't confused by the policy and understand why the policy is in place, where it's coming from, what the information that was used by your school committee group to come up with this policy was, so that they feel your community feels comfortable that you did your due diligence in coming up with a policy, much like any other policy. So
I would just add from the district perspective that we contracted with Middleborough Pediatrics after vetting the program, hearing from our colleagues who have used the practice for years. As Dr. Bornstein stated, they are in collaboration with a network of 18 practices that represent 78,000 children. We feel very confident, not only in Dr. Bornstein's ability, which you were not questioning, but we feel very confident in his ability, but also know that he is in constant communication with his network and with experts. And so we contract with Middleborough Pediatrics. We do not contract with another doctor to get a different opinion. We consider the opinions that we're getting collective and so incorporative of many medical opinions represented through the practice.
And the other thing I would just add is that, and I should start, like we initiated the meeting a couple weeks ago with all of our schools around this because all the schools are struggling with this. And part of our role of school physicians that we view it to be a school physician is when something comes up like this, is that we want to be proactive to the school district to say, listen, you're going to struggle with this. And we want to make sure that you have the right information to help you guide you through some of these decision making. So as information changes, and if information changes, we may find out that Omicron doesn't have nearly the same likelihood of causing cardiac disease, for instance. We may find that out in a few months, and in which case the current algorithm may be somewhat not accurate anymore. And if something like that comes up, there may need to be some adjustments to policy, and we would be proactive in reaching out to the schools, not just your school, but all the schools, but saying, we want to let you know that the data's changed and you need to think about making some adjustments accordingly. So, we view our role kind of proactively, not just reactively to what the school concern is, but if we see things that are happening that we need to make the school districts aware of, we'll reach out, particularly as it pertains to something that would be involving a change of policy, whether it's isolation policies for school or a sports policy or anything like that. So.
The next question is from Karen Corey, 59 Arbor Way. I'm curious why, with Omicron causing less symptoms for most kids, instead of keeping it the same return to play, you choose to add more time to the guidelines. The kids are not allowed to play right now until day 5 quarantine, plus at least 6 more days with trainer. This is at least 1.5 weeks post-positive test with a green light from their physician. Speaking of, since the child is getting a physician okay before they can even start with a trainer, why are you concerned with liability? Jen Starr is absolutely correct that with even more protocols, there will be much more don't test, don't tell, which is counterintuitive to your new protocol. You can say it's irresponsible parenting, but when your child has 1 day of symptoms and then is told that he or she cannot come back for at least 20 days, which could be their whole season, just does not even come close to making sense to a lot of these parents.
So the thing I would say is that the return to play guideline, the 10 days has never changed. It's always been the same from the beginning. That's been the case from the get-go. And so the thing that changed was not the return to sports protocol per se. What changed was the return to school protocol for isolation. So in the time frame when everyone had to be isolated for a full 10 days for exposure or for having the illness, they were automatically out of sports because they were at home anyways. And so the two timeframes linked up, and so it wasn't ever really a question or an issue. And it's only become a question or an issue since the holiday break when the CDC put out their guideline, with the assumption that the two protocols work in concert with each other, and they don't, because the medical information doesn't change. So put it a different way, if your child has a concussion, they're able to go to class before they can go back to sports. And the same thing is true medically in this scenario, that the child would be potentially ready to go back to the classroom before they would be physically or medically ready to go back to sport.
Can I ask a clarifying question, Doctor?
Yeah.
I'm hearing a lot of parents referring to being quote unquote cleared by their child's pediatrician. Are you saying that the pediatrician is allowing, when the pediatrician is writing the note, they are saying that the child is ready to go back to start the RTP protocol? Or are they inferring that the doctor is saying they're cleared to go back to regular activity?
So, okay, let me say so. So, when I see my patients, when like the couple I did today, we're providing them a letter to say they are medically clear to start to a return to play protocol. Okay. So, and these are for the high school, like this is for the high school athlete, right? Mm-hmm. For my, 5-year-old patient who had COVID, we're giving a medical clearance that says they're able to return to gym class. Okay. So we have different letters for the different kid for the different circumstances. Not every kid is going to need a graduated return to play. It's more the athletes, right? Because they're the ones at higher risk. The child who is, the only exercise they get is with their thumbs using the video controller is not a high risk kid. They don't need to go to the trainer to do that. So the clearance that we're providing is that. Now, again, there may be times, and I've said, like I've done this, where the information I have suggests that the athlete doesn't need a return to play protocol because of what the timing of things and when things have gone on. And in which case I'll write a letter saying they're ready to go back to full participation in sports without anything. So the letter, the physician has the discretion to direct the school about what needs to be done. And the physician should be explicit, ideally, in the information they're giving to the school about what needs to be done, right? So, if there's confusion from a parent standpoint, I would always say, just go back to your physician, make sure the physician clarifies what they're saying in the letter so that there's not confusion on the school side of it. Because if the school just says, and they can certainly see it, where if the school just gets a letter that says they're medically clear, what does that mean, right? Like from the school standpoint. And so the school may need some clarification from the physician in that case. That's just a communication issue, I would say.
Right. And I'm wondering if someone gets a note that says they're medically cleared, that they're inferring that means that they can just go back without a protocol, and perhaps they can speak to their physician to be more clear if in fact they're saying they don't need the protocol.
Yeah, if the family's physician says they don't need to do a gradual return to play, they're good to go, like right now, they just need to specify that in the letter, right? So, and that's fine. And then
thank you.
That would obviously supersede the school return to play policy in that setting.
Kathy Hall, 22 Gilmore Street. Can you please clarify between the heart issues and COVID? We never heard of heart issues or myocarditis until the vaccines announced it as a reaction. Should this only be for vaccinated kids? And she also asked, what about myocarditis and strep? That has been prevalent forever. Strep is a common disease. We have never been concerned before.
So the heart disease that strep is noted for is rheumatic heart disease, which causes valvular heart disease. So it's not myocarditis per se. And in very rare cases, you can get pericarditis, which is a direct infection of the lining of the heart from strep. That'll stick in the ICU. Like those kids don't look well. They're on death's door. So the type of what we're talking about with myocarditis is typically there's an acute infectious phase. So part of the reason why we don't bring kids back at 3 or 4 days is you're going to find abnormalities more frequently at 3 or 4 days, but as the illness resolves, most of that will resolve. So, when we bring them back at 10 days, we're kind of blissfully missing some cases that were mild and transient and got better. Okay, but there's a post-infectious component to COVID. So when we think about in kids, the extreme case is what's called MIS-C, where you get inflammation in all sorts of organ tissues, not just the heart, but all over the place. And that's a post-infectious inflammatory process where it's not direct relation to acute viral loads in your body at that time. It's your body's response to the virus. And so a lot of the myocarditis and cardiac stuff, including clotting issues that happens in women, are these post-infectious complications, and not always in that first week to 10 days. And that's a unique feature of this illness compared to a lot of viruses. We do see other post-infectious conditions and viruses. Chickenpox is a classic one, actually, where you can get some post-infectious ataxia and cerebellar disorders. But because of the prevalence of COVID, or let me put it this way, if this was a disease that only struck 1 in 100,000 people, and you're talking about 0.5 to 3%, we would not be having these protocols. The problem is right now you're getting hundreds of kids a week getting infected. And so when you're talking about 0.5 to 3%, you're talking at least 4 or 5 kids are going to have some kind of heart condition in your district within a couple of weeks potentially. So it's not a minor number when you think about the number of kids who get infected. And so, safety and surveillance is our only tool at the moment to try to identify those kids to help prevent something important, not, try to prevent something bad happening on the court. When your heart is not able to meet the demands of exercise, you risk a heart attack. That's what happens. That's what you don't want to have to happen to your kid. You don't want to have to bring out the defibrillators on the court in front of the crowd. That is bad. So that's why it's strict. And again, it's not, it wouldn't be an issue if it wasn't the disease driving this, right? This is not about us worrying about something that is minor. I mean, it is worrying about potentially major things happening to your athletes. So that's why everyone has these policies in place. In the same way, the concussion stuff, right? Second concussion syndrome is rare. It's much rarer than the heart complications with COVID, but second concussion syndrome is almost universally fatal. I think if it happens, you have nothing you can do about it. So, and all the legislation across the United States came from a case in the concussion story, a kid from Washington who got innocently tackled, didn't seem like much. Next play, right down the sideline, got tackled, and then died on the field in front of the whole crowd. And when you look back at the view, you could see the kid walking back. You can go on YouTube and you see this kid's Travis, I forget what his name was. You can see him, he just kind of stumbles a little bit back in the huddle, and then 2 plays later, he goes out. And that's why it's the only law in this country that got universally accepted by 50 states, in a short period of time, because that should never happen to any family and should never happen to any kid. So, that's why the protocols are what they are at the time. And again, you're dealing with the information on hand. It's a new disease. There's a lot of information that comes out all the time. It's an evolving condition. We've got evolving viruses. The guidelines will evolve. They will change. One would hope that they change for the better. The biggest possible change is that vaccination may be the change, right? If the data from France that just came out last week holds up in the United States, that kids who are vaccinated aren't getting MIS-C, fully vaccinated, aren't getting MIS-C, and aren't getting cardiac problems, then there's your answer. If you're fully vaccinated, you're not going to need to do this. It's just not going to be an issue. That data is not certain yet, but it's promising, right? So, I think that's what everyone's waiting to see. But, when you're a scientist, you don't want to, there's enough times when you make a false assumption and you get proven wrong by the data. So there's a difference between being hopeful and optimistic that that's going to happen, and then actually having proof that that's what the data shows. So, I think that's where, everyone in between plays it cautious. I guess that's where how it works.
Kathleen Sheehan, 10 Harrison Avenue. She has about 5 questions and comments here. So I'll go through.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I'll go through them one at a time. Is data you provided regarding the 11 times greater risk stratified by gender?
There is some stratification by gender. So we definitely know that boys are at higher risk of myocarditis from, or males, I should say, are at higher risk for myocarditis from the vaccine. I actually don't know. I'd have to look. I don't know if that's true for the disease breakdown. I don't know if that's true, but for the vaccine, it's definitely true. So, that's a conversation that comes up a lot, but, for girls, it's so much less of a worry. The vaccine actually is the opposite in parents. A lot of the girls, for women, middle-aged women, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine had clotting risks that were really associated with middle-aged women, not associated with men. So, for some of our patients who have pre-existing cardiac issues, the cardiologists early on were actually recommending that they get the Johnson & Johnson vaccine for those kids. And then for the hematologists, they were telling them to get the mRNA vaccines because of the clotting issue with the Johnson & Johnson stuff. Anyways.
Our next is a comment. It says recent data is indicating that the risk is slightly greater for young men after the second dose. And yes, myocarditis can occur after influenza.
So myocarditis in influenza usually is in the acute phase of influenza. So that's not incorrect, that statement. It's usually not a post-infectious phase, and it's not nearly as prevalent as COVID. But influenza can also cause other cardiac stuff too. That's very rare, but there are cardiac complications, but it usually comes in the acute phase of the illness. The second, I'm sorry, what was this first part of that you said?
That the recent data is indicating the risk is slightly greater for young men after the second dose.
That's true. Yeah,
and then, sorry,
is a little bit higher after that. Go ahead. Yep.
Again, Kathleen Sheehan said, it is extremely concerning that our district physician just stated that influenza does not cause myocarditis. There have been numerous studies indicating that this is untrue. Furthermore, myocarditis is listed as a complication of influenza by the CDC.
Yes, as I said, it's not this delayed. It doesn't happen the same frequency as with COVID. It's not in this delayed fashion typically, as it is with COVID. So it looks a little different with influenza, but yes, no, influenza certainly can cause, many viruses can cause myocarditis. It's not just COVID.
And then she said, myocarditis can be a complication from strep. Seriously? This misinformation is shocking and disappointing. And then she said, can you please speak to this and why the RTP has never been previously implemented? And she put in an article that I can forward to you.
Sure, you can do that.
And then the last is, aren't cardiologists now finding scarring of the myocardium in patients with this mild post-vaccine myocarditis? Doesn't this scarring have the potential to cause lifelong cardiac issues? I find it really disturbing that you're referring to this post-vaccination myocarditis mild.
So it's all relative, right? So when there have been cases of severe myocarditis and cardiac things related to the vaccine, but the frequency of that in comparison to self-limited cases that resolve is small. And when you compare that to the disease, it's just a different percentage. So the relative risks that the FDA and the CDC and professional medical bodies have looked at said, which is the, for lack of a better word, if you want to view it in this way, which is the worst of two evils. And the disease causes more significant and more frequent cardiac disease than the vaccine. And let's not forget, COVID is not only about cardiac issues, like obviously there's other complications of COVID. So I'm happy to look at whatever article it is. The story is not fully out on the vaccines either, right? They're fairly new, just like the disease, they're whatever 9 months behind the disease. So there's more story to be told from the cardiac side of it and for any long-term complications of this disease as well. And that data continues to roll out frequently. And that's why you are going to see changes in recommendations, changes in guidelines, changes in therapeutics, changes in medical approaches, because as more information becomes available and better information becomes available to work from, then you alter how you do things accordingly. So decisions are made based on the available information at any given point in time, which is why at this point in time, we can work with what the information we have. But over the next few months, if it changes, we will certainly bring that forth to the school and say, nope, things have changed for good, for bad, for whatever, and we will make sure that the school's aware of it.
So clarifying, oh, sorry, Maria Picanzi, 5 Wedgewood Drive. So clarifying, my child, for example, has the sniffles, test positive, can't hit the courts for a minimum of 10 days. Is this true? How can a student return earlier?
So the current guidance would say if your child has symptoms, not symptoms of COVID, test positive, so a confirmed case, then yes, that you should be without exercise for 10 days, even if the symptoms resolve within that time frame before they would return to any exercise. And that would be for any age group. And that's not a sports thing, that's just an exercise guidance for anyone, adults, kids, whoever.
So Kathy Hall, 22 Gilmore, what if my PD disagrees and isn't concerned with myocarditis and believe my child can return to play sooner than what you feel is appropriate?
Then I think your pediatrician has the authority to make the appropriate medical decision for your child. Absolutely.
Right, we
Yeah.
discussed this earlier, and they would just need to make it explicit in the letter
Yeah,
that they
they just
sent
need
to
to
the
be-
school, because we are not medical doctors. They would have to be very
Right.
explicit that this return to play is not necessary for this student athlete.
Right. Yeah, I think there just needs to be understanding, like individual decision-making for the medical choices for a child really should happen at the child's physician level. And the child's physician discretion, they may say that your child can go back sooner, they may say your child may not go back sooner, like because they had underlying heart disease and they had to wait longer. Those decisions can only be made at the individual physician level. Those should not be being made at a school district level, which is why the letters need to be cleared at the school. And then once the school has the clearance letter, then they can have their protocol in place for how to safely get them back into exercise.
And the last question, I think, Maria Picanzi, 5 Wedgewood Drive, should you get vaccine date, positive date from boys 13 to 18 years old to do a return to play?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the question.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what that means either. I think that whenever the parents would report their positive date,
Yeah.
if a child was positive. I'm not sure about the vaccine
Oh,
date.
let me make one thing, because I think this is a point of confusion. Sometimes people get confused about what the start date is. Is it when they got sick or when the symptoms are? It's usually the timing is from symptom onset. So if you had symptoms and then 2 days later you test positive, you don't start from the date of the test. You start earlier. So those individual questions, again, for an individual parent should go back to the physician, because the physician would set the date, figure out the dates for you. But you don't start later just because you couldn't get a test done until later. But maybe that was what was trying to be addressed.
Okay. The other questions I will read during public comment.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Hopefully that was helpful for everyone.
Thank you very
Dr.
much.
Bornstein.
Yep.
Okay,
Michelle,
yes.
could I
Yes.
just also add a huge thank you to Dr. Bornstein? I'm not sure he was expecting to be responding to multiple questions, but I feel like I learned a lot. So I'm very grateful to you, Dr. Bornstein, if you're still here.
Yes, absolutely. It's like I said to him, I'm definitely going to have to listen to this again. So much information. Okay, so when we get to the next meeting, let's revisit the workshop within the next week.
Whenever you'd like, yep.
And have a first reading. All right. Discussion and vote to approve the annual town report of the school committee. So I don't know if I'm tossing that back to you, Dr. Cabral, if you want me to just talk into it.
No, you go right ahead. That's fine.
First, I wanted to thank.
Michelle,
Yes.
Michelle, excuse me. Michelle, don't we have to go back to number 8? Don't we have to go back to number 8?
Yep. So discussion and possible vote to cancel the February 10th, 2020 school committee meeting. So that is February 10th. That is a regular school committee meeting. But I think that it was due to attendance. I don't know, Dr. Crowell, do you want to speak into that?
Well, we have a meeting on the 10th and the 17th,
Yep.
and we really don't need both of them. But the next one after is on March 10th. And so we thought if we had it on the 17th, it would be, we wouldn't have 4 weeks until the next meeting. It would be 3 weeks until the next meeting.
Okay, so we would be keeping the February 17th, but not having the February 10th. Does anyone have a question on that? Comment? No? Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, so could I get a motion to cancel our February 10th, 2022 regular school committee meeting?
Star, so moved.
Can I get a second?
Wiseman second.
Roll call vote.
Having the same trouble as Nancy, I couldn't unmute myself. O'Neill, yes.
All right, Durant, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Nancy. Okay, so discussion and vote to approve the annual town report for the school committee. And I was saying, I just wanted to thank Jen. Jen and I worked, it was a collaborative effort, and it would not be here if it wasn't for the fact that it was a collaborative effort. That's a lot of work.
It is, but you did an awesome job
thank her.
wrapping it up and getting over the finish line.
I
I think I
think
stopped halfway through.
Are there any edits or questions or anything with that? Because we need to get it to, somebody can tell me this process. We need to get it to the town for the 15th. So I guess we need to approve it, and then I'm not sure, do I send it to the town or does Lynn?
You can give it to Lynn and she will forward it to the town, because every department head in every school and I and all the departments here do reports as well. So we'll compile them and send them together.
Okay, thank you for that.
Mhm.
So if there's no edits to it,
Michelle.
Nancy?
Hi. All right, you guys did a great job, and I totally understand appreciate the work you put into this. In the paragraph that starts, the school year 2020-21 again brought unprecedented challenges, and then at the end you also put in these unprecedented times. Do we want to do unprecedented twice? That's fine with me, because that's the word of 2021. So
Can you tell me what paragraph you're on, Nancy? What paragraph?
say that again.
What paragraph are you in?
Like the third one from the top. Third one from the top. The unprecedented twice, at the beginning and the end.
I'm not seeing it.
Okay, so
I see it. So what would we suggest for an edit during these challenging times?
well, I don't know.
Sentence.
I'm just saying, it's fine if you want to use both on. I just thought maybe it was redundant. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's up to you guys. I don't care. I'm just
How about we
saying.
just strike the
On the
first
map.
unprecedented?
Jen, I need to know where you are and not be
Yes.
lost. Thank you.
So third paragraph. So the
Yep.
first paragraph is one sentence, then the
Yep.
second paragraph, third paragraph. So the one
Oh,
that starts with the
It
school
wasn't
year
counting that
2020,
first
21.
one sentence as a paragraph.
Yeah, yep.
What are you talking about?
So I think if we just strike unprecedented from the first sentence, just the school year again brought challenges to the district, et cetera, and then unprecedented times, which I know is
Okay.
like, we never want to see that word again, but
I
it really is
But
appropriate.
it's important that it is. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Then in the paragraph that starts, athletics returned under modified conditions.
Yes.
Okay? So, okay, so see where you wrote OA was able to run every sport? It's
Yep.
like in the middle of the paragraph. Okay. Did EMS also run their sports? So should it be OA and EMS or just OA?
That came
the
from
middle
Bill.
school
We
Came
can,
from Bill, Nancy.
yeah, we can clarify. I
Oh.
don't think EMS ran all of their sports. I think if they ran
Okay.
any, it was very limited, if any. Is that Chrissy's nodding?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we asked Bill to send
In
us.
the paragraph, what?
We had asked Bill to send us some highlights.
Well, I would like, definitely you want to get this in and I understand. I'm trying to just bring up a couple of things. In the next paragraph, the 2020-2021 school year presented the music department. So about 4 lines down, it says several students were accepted. I don't think students needs to be capitalized.
That's right. Yep.
Okay, yeah.
And then in the last sentence, Richardson Olmsted is spelled incorrectly.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And then, I think, let me see if
Yep.
Over
Jackie,
in the-
Jackie's name is misspelled in the next,
okay.
catch that.
And in the big last paragraph, there were several milestones. In the middle, it says an addition of an alternate of 148,000. What, I don't know what that is. With the addition of an alternate of,
Martin. So what did you
Okay.
don't know what,
I don't know what that means.
Jackie, can you clarify?
With the addition. Can anybody, with the addition of an alternate of $148,537? I just don't. And some of this stuff I look at, and the thing is, these town reports actually become part of Easton's history. So from the historical society membership that I have, you wanted to convey what people are going to read about this in 100 years. Do you know what
So
I'm saying?
why
No
don't you just
pressure,
take
Michelle.
out, why don't you just take out this, ended as, and the Bright Builders are recommended that the select board execute the same. Take out that next sentence. You don't really need that next sentence about the bid.
Okay, so you're taking out from the bid. all
So
the way
you take out the Bright bid for the project was blah, 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 with the addition of a blah, blah, blah. And just, you don't necessarily need those numbers in to kind of get the
And then
point
go right
across.
to
Dr.
in March.
Cabral, do you disagree with that or?
I don't disagree.
Okay. And then,
in March.
you can even say in early March, school planning committee voted to award the contract to Bright Builders and recommended that the select board execute the same. You can even take out in March, the select board voted to execute the contract because you can take out both those sentences if you want,
Okay,
and then just go with construction kickoff meetings and work began mid-March.
okay.
And it's very well done. The only other thing, I don't know, like a lot of times, like you threw out the article, graduation was held outdoors at Oliver Ames. Should it say Oliver Ames High School? Like or OAHS? I don't know. I just feel like at Oliver Ames High School. I don't know. That's up to you guys. So I'm just putting it out there. Like I said, I'm just, an assistant principal is the new Oliver Ames High School principal when we're talking about Mrs. Kavanaugh there.
Yep.
Up to you guys. But very good. I'm very impressed. You did a great job.
Well, we had a good template to start with, Nancy, so thank you for
Well,
giving us a really good starting point.
Jackie gave me mine, so.
And Lori Hahn gave me mine.
There you go.
Anyone else have edits?
I don't have an edit, but I just want to say that I admire you gratefully. You did a very thorough job. And of the 2 times I was chair, that was the job I really hated. That was part of being chair, was doing the annual report. So kudos to you both.
We thank you. All right, so can I get a motion to approve the annual town report of the school committee with the edits mentioned tonight?
Wiseman, so moved.
Second, DeLuca.
All right, roll call vote.
Neil, yes.
Durant, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Excellent, thank you. All right, where are we? COVID case updates. Dr. Cabral or Chrissy?
Well, I think we will be pleased to see that what we had predicted as the downward trend is seeming to be true. However, as Dr. Bornstein was discussing, we still have a great many cases each week. In comparison, it's a lot less, but we need to remember we have more cases of this virus than anything else in the district. So we just need to be aware of that and make sure we keep it in the proper context. But I will send it to Assistant Superintendent Chrissy Pruitt, who can share the details with you, and both of us can answer questions if you'd like.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see it?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to actually put it in present mode. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Right, so I have some updates on our current numbers and also to share information on our new COVID testing program that will begin that started with staff this week and will begin for students next week. So yes, we are very happy to report that we have drastically dropped over the past 4 weeks. We went from in the above 250 cases to just above 200. Last week was in the 80s, and this week you can see that we have 62 cases within the district. So you'll see that reported to DESE, and here are the current numbers. It's nice to be able to put some zeros in again. So I'm hoping that this trend continues, which we are predicting will. And again, just looking at from year to year, the spike this year actually replicates similar to the spike last year. We can see last year the spike did go up a little bit. It did spike up a tiny bit at the beginning of February, but we are hoping that it does continue to decline. And you can see the drastic drop from a few weeks ago, thank goodness. But again, just to point out, we are still higher with the number of cases that we have than we did last year. So the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and in conjunction with the Mass Department of Public Health have created a new COVID-19 testing program that we will be implementing here we started implementing this week here in the Easton Public Schools. So just to share some background with you, they reviewed statewide testing program data, and what they found that as of January 9th, 98.6% of students participating in the Test and Stay program tested negative. So 98% or 99 almost percent of those students that actually were tested utilizing the Test and Stay program, the results were negative. So as a result, individuals identified as close contacts in school are very unlikely to contract or spread COVID-19. We're not saying that those who have COVID don't spread it. We're saying that those who have been identified as close contacts in school are less likely or very unlikely to contract or spread COVID-19. Due to limited transmission from close contacts, extensive contact tracing and test and stay procedures they found are not adding significant value to the mitigation strategy. So as a result, they have recommended this new testing program, which it's being recommended for school personnel to focus on identifying symptomatic individuals rather than monitoring in-school close contacts who are unlikely to contract or spread the virus. So now let's talk about the actual program itself and the implementation details. So in order to participate in the program, you must opt in. If you do not fill out the opt-in form, we are assuming that you are not participating in the program, or your child is not participating in the program. Once every 2 weeks, your child, if you opt in, will come home with the box that you see in the upper right corner, the iHealth COVID-19 antigen rapid test. This box contains 2 tests. One test should be administered on a given date that actually I'll review this again at the end of the presentation. So this is the schedule that we are putting out so that all students at the primary elementary schools, Center, Parkview, and Moreau, the first week, they'll go home with the test on Tuesday, for example, and then the expectation is that they administer, they perform the test that night. And we do have it spread out over the course of the week so that we have time to go in and separate the tests and send them out, which I'll get into in a minute. Once they do it that 1 week, then the second test should be used the following week on the same day. So if my child is in 2nd grade at Parkview, they would come home on Tuesday with a test. I would administer the test to them on Tuesday. I'll save the second test for the following week and administer it on Tuesday the following week. And then that 3rd week, my child would come home with another box of tests. Now, like I had said, they will receive the iHealth rapid test biweekly. The families are expected to report positive cases only. We do not need to know about negative cases, only positive cases. And then similar to what we've been doing in, with any positive case, they would follow the same procedure if your child tested positive. There's still the 5 days of quarantine expected, where the test date, if you're asymptomatic, is day 0, or the day you start with symptoms is day 0. This is important to know that all staff and students can participate regardless of vaccination status. Staff and families can opt in at any time. So great example is those of us, I'll say us, that had COVID within the past 90 days may not want to opt in because there is that chance that they still may test positive. However, what DESE has told us is that it is highly unlikely with the rapid tests, because that is a very surface level test, where the PCR test is the one that is more likely to show a positive test, even if within the past 90 days. So for example, staff and families, they may not opt in right now, but in March, they may decide that's a better time for them to opt in, or any given time. So that link is staying live. In fact, during this presentation, we had 3 more families opt into the program. So you'll see I updated the number, well, you won't see it, but I updated the number at the bottom right before I showed this presentation. The Test and Stay program will, okay, I'm sorry. I see an error in my presentation here. So staff and students will not be identified as close contacts in school starting on Monday, January 31st. We are eliminating identification of close contacts, and we will be eliminating the Test and Stay program. Yeah, okay, so that does mean Test and Stay program will not be used in EPS beginning on January 31st. So parents that are used to receiving multiple notifications throughout the week, you will not be receiving notifications that your child is a close contact anymore. It's important to note that symptomatic testing will still occur. And again, that's a separate link that we must have consent. So if your child is symptomatic, regardless of vaccination status, that will still occur in the schools. And then also a letter went home this week containing links to videos and visuals for administration of the test. Currently, we have 1,328 students enrolled and 367 staff. And again, you know, I've been receiving multiple emails from people asking if they should opt in, if they just had COVID or not. So I wouldn't necessarily look at this data as people not wanting the test. I would also include that, yes, there are people that are not interested in the test, which is fine. And there are also people that had tested positive that have decided not to start testing yet. And again, just to go over the administration and testing schedule, the primary schools are Tuesday. The Oliver Ames High School will be, the students that opt in will be receiving their tests on Wednesday and are expected to test that night. And then Richardson Olmsted on Thursday and Easton Middle School on Friday. So that is an overview of the new program. Do you have any questions? Jen?
If a student is absent on the day that they would receive the test at school, would they be eligible to pick it up when they return?
Yes, and the expectation is that they would administer the test that night. And again, the students and staff would administer the test regardless if they have symptoms or not, because the idea is that this virus is showing up in people and they're not showing symptoms. So this is to protect everyone.
Any other questions? I have two, Chrissy. The data from the beginning of the presentation with the drop in cases, is that partly because we aren't doing as much contact tracing? I mean, if we're not doing that contact tracing, obviously we're not identifying numbers. And then my follow-up to that is, are you saying that as of Monday, we're not even doing contact tracing during lunch?
That is correct. So the latter is correct. We're not contact tracing at lunch either. And the beginning, the data that I shared with you has dropped so much, and that is in direct alignment with what we're seeing throughout Massachusetts as well as the Northeast. So I know that it's kind of staggering throughout the states, and the national narrative is really that it's leaving the the Northeast and kind of matriculating throughout the other states. So it is in conjunction with what we're seeing nationally as far as the drop off in cases. And as far as contact tracing, what the data is suggesting is that the students that are being identified as close contacts, we're only testing the unvaccinated kids. We're not testing in the test and stay program the vaccinated kids. That's what the rules were from DESE. So, and on top of that, the percentage was what the state shared was that only 2% or less than 2%, 1.8% were testing positive in all of the tests that were being administered.
So then as of Monday, the only program we're going to have is this voluntary opt-in test at home.
And the symptomatic testing program. So if a child has symptoms at school, the nurse will be able to, as long as they have consent, they will be performing a test to see if they have COVID. Now, I will also note, please do not send your child to school thinking that they can get it with symptoms, thinking that they can get a test. So, you know, don't utilize the schools as a testing site, for example. If your child has symptoms, please keep them home and administer either an at-home test or provide a PCR.
Any other questions? No, thank you. Okay. Are there any other public comments, Chrissy?
Yes. Okay, let me go back up. Lauren Loomis, 4 Abbey Road. At what grade is a student eligible for the certification program? How long are each of the programs? Just confirming there is no commitment for the student to enter these employment fields. Even for a student who wants to pursue pre-med or the sciences in college, this would be impressive on a college application.
So anyone who's interested should contact their guidance counselor. The guidance counselors have all of this information, including the sign-up information, and they can talk to them about, it's not just about their age, it's also about their current program. If they can take on the coursework, for example, it's the program that adults take to be certified in these areas. So it can be intensive. So we certainly encourage people to pursue it. And I would say that everyone should speak to their guidance counselor and they can give them the exact information. They have far more detailed information than what we provided tonight in the contract.
The next is a comment from
Oh,
Maria.
sorry. And you
Oh.
said something about commitment. There's
Yes.
no commitment to pursue anything after. If this is, I didn't mean to cut you off, sorry. If
That's
this
okay.
is a base of knowledge that the student is going to take forward in their life and has nothing to do with their future career, we find that to be perfectly acceptable. And we're very happy to be able to provide this for as long as we can.
The next is a comment from Maria Pacanzi, 5 Wedgewood Drive. Leisha and David, great program with the ambulance EMT program. The next is from Erica Mandel, 50 Main Street. So sad to hear that Mr. K is leaving. We have loved him since Moreau. He's the best. Tom Corey, 59 Arbor Way. We were told the mask mandate at our Easton schools would be temporary until October. We were then told the masking of our children would be extended longer. In addition to that, we were then notified that masks would remain until 80% is vaccinated. Omicron is 99% of all cases and most typically is very mild in symptoms, especially in children. Boston area doctors are now urging masks in schools to be optional. Other towns like Cohasset have dropped the mask mandate for middle school and high school for all students vaxxed and unvaxxed. What is the current vaccinated percentages for each Easton school today? Will you please consider following these other towns and dropping the mask mandate for our children and make it optional for masking? Lastly, when you lift the mandate, would you please not discriminate towards children that are unvaccinated and treat all equally?
So I'll just start with the first one and underscore that we treat all children equally on every issue. We are in this business to serve children, and certainly we would never discriminate against any child for any reason, certainly not this one either. The majority of what you discussed is not under our control. This is the policy as set forth by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We do not have 80% of our students vaccinated at this point, and so we do not qualify. Towns like Cohasset have over 95% vaccination rates for their students and staff, and so they're able to utilize that option when the commissioner lifts the mandate that everyone wear a mask, which for now is in place till at least February 28th. So even if he does lift it, he has said in the past, and I would imagine it will continue, that the vaccination rate must be over 80%. And as far as students, we are not close to that right now. And so we would not qualify if that remains the same. If it changes, we will obviously keep abreast of that and we will let people know. But as of right now, we would not, if he changed it tomorrow, we would not qualify under our current vaccination rate. But again, we're monitoring that regularly and certainly will make adjustments as warranted for what we are allowed to do.
Next question is from Lauren Loomis, 4 Abbey Road, regarding RO Playground. Love this idea of revamping the playground. Based on your timeline, will this impact the current playground at all during the school year? The reason I ask is that because the current second graders from Parkview have been without a playground, and now they potentially will be going to RO and not having a playground. These kids deserve a playground. Just something to please consider for them when discussing timing.
Yes, our intention is for construction to take place in the summer of 2023. So it shouldn't affect the school day. Of course, we don't have complete control over vendors or supply chain issues or funding or things of that nature, but it is our absolute intention to have this work completed over the summer so it's not affecting either school business or affecting the children not having access to a playground.
Okay. Amy Duffy, 178 Washington Street. If my children were recently positive, 12/31, do they still have to test once the program starts on 1/31, or should we wait until March? Thank you for all you're doing.
Yes, no is the answer. Yes, I agree. No, they do not have to be tested. It is estimated that the Omicron virus or the Omicron variant may not provide the quote unquote 90-day protection, that it perhaps is shorter. But I would say certainly it would be safe to say that for at least 60 days, this child would not need to test. It is certainly possible that they could show positive just because of the proximity of their positive test result in the first place and the fact that they had COVID. So it wouldn't actually be a valid result.
Leonardo Bellini, 752 Foundry Street, Easton. I just attended the winter concerts at the high school on Tuesday for RO and on Wednesday for the middle school. It was a huge number of people crammed together. Also, there was a basketball game on Tuesday and a wrestling meet on Wednesday. I see that the school committee is having technical difficulties at times. While Governor Baker allows for remote meetings to meet quorum, it does not mean you need to meet remotely. I live in Easton, pay taxes in Easton. My kids go to Easton schools, so I don't care about what other schools do. If events as large as the winter concert series was able to be held in person, so should the school committee meetings. With the numbers going down, Harvard medical doctors saying kids don't need masks. And even Governor Baker said that we are on the backside of the Omicron variant. Why is the school committee not meeting in person until the April 14th meeting? Even Chrissy Pruitt's presentation shows dropping numbers.
So that's not a question for me, it's for the school committee, but we get asked that several times and I've heard the answer. And as long as I'm not misspeaking, please correct me if I am, Mrs. Durant, but all of the town's meetings are remote right now. And I believe that the school committee is following what the town is currently doing. If that changes, I would imagine the school committee would change that as well. As you can see, Mrs. Pruitt and I are in the district. We are in the district every day. So we would be able to have the meeting in person. However, it is not following what the town is doing. And as of today, none of the town committees are meeting in person.
Kathleen Sheehan, Harrison Avenue. How much is the total cost of the contract with the testing company? And why are we going outside of what the Commonwealth is providing at no cost? How will this additional testing benefit students and staff? Why would we not look to enter into this agreement after the free testing program provided by the Commonwealth has ended? Was this a direct request from the EEA? Was this put out to bid per school committee policy?
Okay, so we don't have a school committee policy about putting out to bid for tests. The total contract price, I can get that for you in a second. The reason that we ordered them was because we were told we were not going to get tests, but then we got tests, but then we were told it was only going to last until April. And because we're finding that after vacations are when we have spikes, and this is going to end before we get back from April vacation, we wanted to have the option for at least staff. We did not offer it, we did not order it for all students. We ordered it for our staff. We are having difficulty having enough adults in the buildings at all times to have safe operation of schools. And so it's very important that we are identifying staff members who may be carriers but not aware of it, so that they don't spread it to other adults and risk us having to close our schools. And so we ordered enough for staff only for after April. And the cost, I believe it's around $30,000, but let me. The cost is $32,042. And as I said earlier, FEMA is reimbursing the cost. So this is not coming from taxpayers. It's not coming from the operational budget. It is actually coming from federal stimulus funds for this exact purpose.
Kathleen Sheehan, 10 Harrison Avenue. What is the current vaccination rates at our individual schools?
I would have to get that for you. I don't have that written down right now. We've been checking with the Board of Health regularly. I do know that at Richardson Olmsted, for example, students who have had just one vaccination dose is around 50%. It's higher at the other grades, but it is back down to 50, I think 57% the last time I checked for 2 doses of the vaccine. And so far, I don't believe that the town is keeping track of boosters, but we are basing the 80%, at least right now, the commissioner is basing that on the 2 doses of the vaccine. And so we are not close. We do have 97% of the staff vaccinated with 2 doses. We haven't yet collected the information on the boosters, but we don't have enough students who are vaccinated to make 80%.
Okay, Kathy Hall, 22 Gilmore. Since it is apparent that masks aren't being taken off anytime soon, are you going to speak on the type of mask and how they now say cloth masks aren't effective?
We are, so first of all, we have masks available for any students that want them. If at any time a parent is uncomfortable with a cloth mask, they certainly can get daily surgical masks from the school. We have enough of those to last for the rest of the school year. I don't want to have a broad stroke saying that all cloth masks are not effective. There is definitely evidence that a lot of cloth masks aren't effective. However, there are cloth masks that have multiple layers, that have removable filters in them, and so forth. We do not, there is a school committee policy about masks that are not allowed, but it does not include cloth masks, because we are leaving that determination to parents to find a mask that is effective and comfortable for their children, and that's very different for every child. If you are concerned that your child's mask may not be effective, we have had, and I do it, I have it here, wear the surgical mask with the cloth mask over it. And certainly, again, we have those available for any student. You can have your child get a week's worth of masks at a time, and they can have a different one every day if that is your preference.
Tom Corey, 59 Arbor Way. I think this was already answered, but it's what is the percentage of vaccination rate in the middle school and the vaccination rate at the high school? I didn't hear that question answered.
Yeah, it was in the last time I spoke to the health department, it was in the high 50% for 2 doses. So I, several days ago, sent an inquiry if we could get an update on that. They're certainly overwhelmed as we are. And so I know that I will get an answer to that as soon as possible, and I'll have that answer. But I don't anticipate that it went up close to 30% in just a couple of weeks.
Kathleen Sheehan, Harrison Avenue. Dr. Cabral, can you please cite where you found data that indicated natural immunity from Omicron may not last 90 days? Because all the data I have seen contradicts what you stated.
No, I cannot give that because I am not a medical professional and I didn't prepare it as a report for this. I am not suggesting that we have 60 days. I am saying that it has been in medical journals and I don't have the exact journal in front of me. I'm not stating it with medical authority, and so I feel comfortable sharing information that I am not imposing on anyone or making a policy.
Leonardo Bellini, 752 Foundry Street. We are constantly having new programs for kids, which is great, but why are we able to afford these programs and not a school resource officer in the schools to ensure the kids are safe? The school committee is talking about playgrounds, tennis courts, pickleball courts, and basketball courts. What about our children's safety? We have had several threats, and it is foolish to not have a school resource officer in the schools. The safety of our kids is more important than any program you could offer. Why do we not have school resource officers in our budget?
So we are very supportive of the school resource officer program. Neither the police budget nor our budget allows for that expense. Every single thing you named, the playground, tennis court, pickleball court, basketball court, and the programs, including the programs that we discussed this evening, are all covered under grants or federal stimulus funds, neither of which can be used for positions. They can't be used for people. We have brought this up at town meeting before and requested larger amounts in our budgets. Both the police officers and we would like to have a school resource officer, and that was denied. And so we basically offer what the town authorizes us to offer with the amount of money that they allow us to have. And so while it's certainly, I can certainly understand, it sounds like we're talking about a lot of things that we're putting quote unquote money into this evening. None of those things are actually from our operational budget.
And Kathleen Sheehan,
I'm sorry, Mrs. Pruitt, but we do security training. It's not like
Absolutely.
we're not doing anything. Okay.
And I also wanted to point out that for 4 of our schools in next year, all of them, they're on the same campus as the police station. If we had a full-time resource officer, theoretically, and again, I'm very much in support of the program and would love to have a school resource officer, but theoretically, the person can only be in one building at a time anyway. And so if the officers at the police station on the campus, it's the same distance to any one of our schools as if they were in one of the schools. So we're happy about that. We still find that there would be far greater benefit to have a school resource officer, and so we will always support that. But I also wanted to point out a comment that we have had several threats, and that is just that is inaccurate. And I just wanted to make sure that I pointed that out. We have not had specific threats to our schools, and certainly not multiple or several, or I'm sorry, I can't remember the word that was used, several. We have not had several threats. So I just want to clarify that.
so the last 2 questions come from Kathleen Sheehan. Could that FEMA money, Harrison Avenue, could that FEMA money have been used for other things like tutoring? If staff are wearing masks and masks are so effective, then why do we need to spend $32,000 on testing staff? And then she also asked, do you do security training for substitutes?
So the FEMA, excuse me, money is very specific what it can be used for. It cannot be used for tutoring. However, the ARPA money can be used for tutoring, and we are using it for tutoring and for summer school. Everything that we have available to us, we are using, but we have to use it to the letter of the law and what it is required to be used for. There are allowable expenses and unallowable expenses, and FEMA cannot be used for tutoring, for example. And the testing, again, is to make sure that masks are not foolproof. As we can see, students are still getting sick and staff are still getting sick. So I'm not sure what the objection is to staff using tests that are paid for by FEMA, that they are administering on their own. But it certainly has identified positive people in the past. After the December break, we had 17 staff members, I believe, who tested positive that did not realize they were positive, and they were not in school and infecting others. So it was helpful to have that information.
And then there is one more from,
Oh, I'm sorry, about substitutes.
oh yeah,
So we have a new fire chief in town, as I'm sure people are aware, and we're recalibrating all of our emergency procedures. A lot of this happens behind the scenes, even though we don't talk about it at every meeting. And we've been having a series of meetings, and we're going to be training all of our regular employees. That includes anyone, any subs that want to come to training. We typically do them on professional development days, but of course they're welcome to be there.
and then the last question is from Karen Corey, 59 Arbor Way. When will you make the percentages of vaccinated children at EMS and OA available? Where will you release those numbers when you quote find and quote them? This number is important. Lots of decisions are being implemented based on this number that you don't even have.
So I do have numbers, and they are not 80%, and I'm not going to find them. I put in a request for them, and they will be coming. And as soon as they come, I will provide them.
And that's all.
Thank you. All right, superintendent notes, Dr. Cabral.
Thank you. We have some bad weather coming. And I'm meeting with the emergency response team tomorrow. I will note that I do meet 2 times a week with all of our emergency responders. That includes police, fire, town administration, health department, and DPW. And we are meeting again. We have an extra meeting added tomorrow to prepare for the storm. While I do not necessarily anticipate that this will affect school, if there are widespread power outages, as we experienced in the fall, that certainly may be the case. So the most current weather forecast that I have has this storm starting Friday night, going into Saturday night, with several inches up to 2 feet in our immediate area. We will be the hardest hit according to the predictions. And again, the concern is not only snow removal, but also the electricity. You know that in Easton, we are notorious for losing power. And in addition to the snow and the weight of the snow on the power lines and tree branches and telephone poles, we also are expected to have, excuse me, some pretty significant winds. And so between the two, there is a high possibility that we are going to be without power. So I will certainly keep everyone informed. We will be utilizing the one-call system. If we are going to be canceling school anytime next week, we certainly hope to avoid that. But again, it will not be known until Sunday how we are with electricity in terms of the snow removal. We have an amazing DPW and also some independent contractors and our own custodians who work very hard on that. There is a definite order, however. As you can imagine, town streets and around emergency areas need to be cleared first, and only after the streets are done, so that residents can get out of their homes and safely maneuver to get provisions or attention, medical help, et cetera, if it's needed, that the roads need to be cleared first. After that, they clear parking lots, which includes our schools. And then once the parking lot is cleared and our staff is able to get in, then we do all of the sidewalks and entryways to make them safe for students and staff. So while someone's street, for example, may look clear and your immediate area may be clear, if there are a lot of roads that aren't open because of downed trees or power lines, or there are areas of town significantly impacted by snow and unable to travel and we can't get buses through, then there may be some considerations for, excuse me, cancellation. But of course, student safety is first and foremost. I will add a reminder that this is true of this week and every other week and every other year, that, excuse me, that if we decide to have school based on the information we have, and any parent feels as though the conditions are not safe for their child, then they should not be sending them to school. So please know that we respect your decision as a parent, depending on your particular situation, on your street or your area of the town, and that is respected. Please do not send your child to school if you feel it isn't safe. We make a determination based on the majority of the town and the condition of the schools and safe approach and entry into the buildings. So please exercise your right as a parent to choose for your child in that situation. So we're going to have, I'll have a little bit of more information tomorrow in terms of preparations, but of course, no one will really know what kind of condition we're going to be in until the storm is actually here. So we'll be on top of that all weekend long. I also wanted to add a bit of good news and let the public know, the general public know, the Easton Middle School's already been notified that we have found a new assistant principal for Easton Middle School after an exhaustive search and thorough vetting of candidates. I think we had 33 applicants. We have hired Stephanie Santos. She is a longtime educator and coordinator, district level coordinator, and dean of students and discipline at the middle school grade and also high school ages in Wareham. And she has, she's in her second decade as an educator, and we are excited to welcome her, hopefully at the end of February, just due to the transition between schools and the other school being able to find coverage for that employee. So we are excited to be introducing her shortly to the community and to the Easton Middle School community. And we hope everyone will join us in welcoming her to the community. And that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you. Assistant Superintendent notes, Chrissy.
Thank you. I wanted to share with you all, if you weren't able to attend, Debbie Irving, the author of Waking Up White, presented to our community and staff on January 11th. We had about 40 participants and great discussion, breakout rooms. She was very personable and really related her presentation to Easton, which was very, very helpful. She's coming back to work with our staff on February 8th. That is more individualized for staff only, to really analyze their instruction and their practices in the classroom. So we're excited for that. We also had our professional development day on the 14th. Our keynote was by Dr. Donovan Livingston, who his commencement speech at the Harvard Graduate School of Education went viral in 2016. He was absolutely fantastic. So many of our teachers have actually reached, or staff members have reached out to him asking questions and advice, and he has responded with such thoughtful and reflective responses. We've been fully impressed with him, and the feedback has been phenomenal. He presents through spoken word, so he uses poetry a lot throughout his presentation, and his topic was equity, diversity, and inclusion, and it was really powerful. We'd love to have him come speak to our students as well, our high school students. And then let me think. I think that's about it. We have a lot going on for Black History Month throughout our schools. While it is a great opportunity for us to highlight our Black history, During a provided month, it's also important that we realize that this is not just a month. We need to embed this throughout our entire programming, and which is what we are working on in the Easton Public Schools. So that's all I have for you this evening. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Does anyone have questions? Great, thank you. All right, school committee notes. Let's start with Caroline.
Nothing tonight. I just want to again express how grateful I am to be working with such a smart, great group of people.
All right, who comes after me? I don't even know. Nancy.
I just hope that all the students that just finished mid-years today did a fabulous job, and we're ready to start term 3 at the high school and continue filling the brains with lots of intelligence.
All right, thank you. Jackie?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
All right, thank you. Jen?
Just wanted to, I was able to listen in to Dr. Livingston's keynote at the professional development. So thank you for always inviting us to listen in on those. As I only caught the last few minutes of him, but wow, what an incredibly dynamic presenter. That I was able to sit through the Q&A and just wanted to really commend the staff on their vulnerability with asking questions in front of each other and supporting each other in their answers, and just wanted to commend you all for that. Comes from creating an environment that's safe for your staff to be vulnerable and to learn and to want to grow and to do better. And that's certainly not the kind of environment that everybody works in. So I just wanted to thank you for creating that environment, because at the end of the day, it's going to help our staff be better educators and help our students have a better educational experience. So it was really gratifying to see that, to kind of have a little window into that environment. And then the presentation by Debbie Irving was fantastic. So thanks for the work of getting her and for opening that up to the community. I hope everybody who participated found it as valuable as I did. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so before we go into executive session, let's talk about a date for a workshop sometime in the next week so we can stay timely to the deadlines to consider a policy. Does anyone have any suggestions on dates? Or
Can I ask, are you looking for Dr. Bornstein to attend as well?
I don't necessarily. I would like to
Okay.
see if Bill Matthews could be there.
Okay, because Dr. Bornstein just shared with me today that Wednesdays are better for him. But I'm not sure about Bill.
So I don't know. Well, how does the committee?
And I'm sorry, Bill Matthews, the trainer, myself are meeting with Dr. Bornstein next Wednesday. So I don't know if you want to wait until after that meeting.
What time are you meeting?
11:30. Or
Yeah,
no,
these
I'm
meetings-
sorry, 1 o'clock.
Well, Michelle, when do you get home? I'm wondering if we could kind of piggyback on that, if that would make sense, if there was a way to do that. Although I don't think you would likely get home in time, Michelle. I don't know.
I think we need to be able to have a chance to read whatever they come up with before.
Oh, that's true. Good point. Good point. I wasn't thinking clearly. So that's, yeah.
So we want to read, Jackie, this is directed to you. So we want to read the updated version, correct? Is that what I just understood?
Yeah, I mean, we just got the policies, so we obviously can look at it, but if they're going to make tweaks to it, it would make sense for us to have our first reading once those are made, I would think.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the next main normal school committee meeting is the 17th. So maybe the 9th. That would be a week after Chrissy, are you saying that you're meeting February 2nd? Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, it's just I'm meeting myself.
So, okay. So if we had our first reading on the 9th, would we be able to get the updated version prior to the 9th so we had time to read through it?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
And you said you said Dr. Borstein, well, I don't want to keep inundating him, but we could invite him for the 9th and then that was up to him. I don't want to overextend that.
Yeah.
But if we could get Bill Matthews, that would be nice too. So the 9th at 5, does that work for you guys on the committee?
That's fine for me.
Nancy's a yes. Does that work for you, Jackie? And Caroline?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so let's say our next meeting then it's going to be a workshop on the 9th, February 9th at 5 o'clock. And then if Bill could make it, that would be great. And then if Dr. Borstein wants to, I mean, certainly welcome him. I don't want him to feel like he has to. Great. All right. Thank you. So I would like to make a motion to enter into executive session and not to return to open session for the purposes of discussing strategy with respect to litigation and bargaining. And in my opinion, having this discussion in public would be detrimental to the bargaining position of the school committee. Do I have a second?
Wiseman, second.
All right, roll call vote.
O'Neill, yes.
Durant, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
All right, great. Thank you. And thank you everyone for tuning in.